The mountainous landscape can be seen through the snow. Two children, holding hands, make their way through the snow. One of them begins to tell the story of the king's treasure. In ancient times, the world of people was ruled by a single king, but the name of this divine figure sank into the sands of time, and only 12 treasures were inherited from him. These divine gifts, called treasures by humans, symbolize power. Each gift is hidden in the depths of a giant tree, and whoever collects them all will become the treasure king, and will also be able to fulfill his cherished desires. From these words, one of the children's eyes lit up. The older child suggests that after finding all the treasures, they meet their mother again and return home. A dark-haired guy with yellow eyes looks ahead. People start falling from a steep cliff. The guy is hanging on the relief of a steep cliff. A fiery abyss is visible below him. A worker sits on the platform and asks if everything is okay. Suddenly, the man on the rope notices flying monsters approaching. The creatures quickly approach the frightened guy. One of them crashes into the rock with a roar. The rest of the people begin to fall straight into the mouth of one of the monsters. The guards at the top of the cliff begin to shoot blue flashes from their rifles. Aim shots drive the stingray-like monsters deeper into the canyon. One of the guards orders them to be driven further and says that raids have become more frequent lately. Shouting at the people hanging on the rock, he dismissively orders them to continue working. Addressing the main character, the guard tells him to stop messing around and get up. He doesn't care whether he survives here or dies. The wounded protagonist silently looked up. With difficulty, he continues to climb the rocky terrain. At the bottom of a narrow, steep canyon, in the depths of a dark cave, a fiery abyss blazes. Workers on platforms cut bright blue stones from the rock. The man in uniform whistled loudly. He notified the workers about the lunch break. Under the supervision of armed guards, people began to climb the rock. One of the workers holds a large grey centipede in his hand. Being very hungry, he began to devour it greedily. During the break, the rest of the people ate the same insects, and the main character sat silently near the wall. He glanced at the two young men sitting next to him. They were without a snack. The main character gives them his plate of food. People begin to quickly devour his portion with silent gratitude. The main character watches this with no appetite at all, because he remembered something this morning. The guards take food from these guys before his eyes. A man in uniform mocks them for not fulfilling the plan. The protagonist's tired eyes had already gotten used to this sight. He gradually stopped feeling anything about everything that was happening here. The guard shouts to attract attention among all the workers. The man announces that a party of newcomers will join them today, and they line up behind him as ordered. He orders them to listen silently to the president, because he has decided to honor them with his visit. A fat man in a luxurious uniform addresses the workers and greets them because they have come a long way. The president assures the recruits that outside the walls of the Aston mining camp, they are nothing but a bunch of criminals and scum. He tells them to rejoice because the ruler of the country has a kind heart and is ready to pardon them. For them, this is the last chance to prove their loyalty to their homeland. Then the man points his hand at the cart with precious stones. He draws attention to the blue crystals of Akima, which the workers in this mine must mine. The president says that Akima is the country's wealth and national resource, the energy of which is necessary for technological development. He stated that their task is to dedicate their lives to mining stones. The recruits are shocked by the information they hear. With a cruel look, the president ordered in a terrible voice to work for the country and to do his duty until death. The unfortunate people were in despair when they heard their fate and future destiny. One of the newcomers ran forward and begged for salvation, but the guard ordered him to be silent and line up again. Two seasoned workers discuss newcomers, wondering how many of them will be able to last a year. The main character looks somewhere into the crowd with a detached gaze. Among the crowd of dejected newcomers, he notices a fair-haired boy. He's a little surprised that they took a child here again. The girl looks around calmly with a neutral expression on her face. During lights out, workers sleep on suspended bunks stretched between wooden beams. The main character can't sleep. He quietly gets off his hammock. In the corridor of the cave, under the light of the ceiling lamp, two guards are talking. The protagonist overhears their conversation about how patrols from the lower floors claim that they heard the girl singing, and since there should be no one in this area, it could be a ghost. The guard, smoking a cigar, jokes that he wouldn't mind if the ghost were a beauty or even a nice guy. Meanwhile, the protagonist slips past them unnoticed. He takes the rope in his hands and begins to carefully descend down the rock. The rope is stretched straight down to a large cave in the canyon. With a lantern in hand, the protagonist goes inside and greets a man named Toa. Sitting down on a rock, he apologizes to her that he couldn't come earlier because the patrols had become stricter. but the protagonist still couldn't wait for the meeting. Putting the lamp on the floor, he says that his day has passed just like the others. Every day, workers die and are replaced by others. The main character says that today he remembered the story that he told her many times before they got here. He reminds the Toa of a treasure trove called Treasure. If they find them all, they can make their wishes come true. With his head down, the protagonist reveals that in fact, this is all a lie, invented in order to stop her from wanting to return home. The main character burst into coughing and covering his mouth with his hand, says that he decided to say all this now, before it is too late. The consequences of a strong cough are visible on the hand, a large blood stain. Leaning over the silhouette lying on the stone, he says that they have worked hard over these 10 years. He turns again to Toa, a thin bandaged girl lying unconscious under a blanket. The main character takes out a device with a glowing crystal inside from his bag. He is holding a gun with a blue stone inside. Continuing the unanswered conversation, he says that it was very difficult to get one of them. Voicing his thoughts, the protagonist asks a rhetorical question why she did not live longer. He stutters as he says that he cannot live without her. He remembers that tomorrow is their birthday. The guy says that it would be nice to celebrate it together. With a gun in his hand and a gleam in his eyes, the protagonist confidently declares that after the party is over, he will follow her and they will finally be able to meet. Suddenly, out of the silence, a voice spoke and said that these two could not meet again. The main character turned around sharply and pointed his weapon in the direction from which the voice came. There was that blonde girl from the crowd. She told the protagonist that he must live on for the sake of everyone's salvation. The girl smiled and said that she had been waiting for this meeting. She addressed the main character, calling him Aaron. The guy was shocked by what he heard and asked her who she was. A column of people with banners and warm clothes walked through the snow towards a huge frozen tree. One of the riders in a red cape and white mask said that because of its size, the tree was worthy of being called the World Tree. The rider looked ahead, where in the frost and cold, under the root of a tree, stood a crowd of people. The president stood there. He realized that those people belonged to the Red Ravens of Thorian. He was surprised that the cardinal's left hand had come here in person. The president addressed her as Reverend Deeptooth and congratulated her on her successful journey. The fat man introduced himself and offered her a rest from the long journey, but the woman in the red cloak refused, saying that there was no time for that. The woman in the white raven mask announced that she had come here to check what she had been told. She asked if they had found it. The president is confident that this is exactly what they were looking for and that what is written in the report is correct. In a dark cave stands Aaron with a shining pistol aimed at a mysterious girl. The protagonist remembered seeing her in the crowd of new arrivals. The guy with a stern look asked her how she found this place and whether he followed him here. The blonde ignored him and walked over to the Toa's body. She leaned over the girl's body and gently stroked her hair. Aaron got angry, pointed the gun at the back of her head and shouted not to touch the toe. The girl realized what was going on and became upset. She assumed that she could get along with her. Looking at her cut hand, she asked rhetorically if it was hard to lose someone so dear. With a smirk on her face, she says that losing a sister is even harder. Then she asks if she was more to Aaron than just his family. Aaron was not happy with this attitude. He angrily, without thinking, shot her in the head. However, the blue light passed right through her without causing her any harm. Suddenly, the girl appeared behind him. With a sly grin, she tells Aaron not to overdo it, because they are on the same side. As she continues to talk, mentioning that she hasn't introduced herself yet, the protagonist is mentally surprised by what happened, because he was definitely aiming for her head. After a short pause, he asks who she is, and if she is a spy. With a carefree smile on her face, she introduced herself. Her name is Ida, Dilandrata, but since it is too long, he can call her Dee. Aaron turned around sharply with a pistol in his hand. The girl disappeared again. Aaron didn't even immediately notice where she had moved to again. Meanwhile, Dee asks if he's interested in how she knows him. As if tipsy, through childish laughter, she says that Toa told her, and they are very close. A furious Aaron turns around and tells her not to talk nonsense. He also mentions that he saw her arrive today with the others, so none of the newcomers can know about the Toa and this place. With a mocking and sarcastic look, Dia replies that she only showed up today to look for him, but she herself has been here for a very long time. Without hesitation, Aaron fired again in her direction, cutting through the air. The protagonist looks around and doesn't see her anywhere. The girl is convinced that the guy has trust issues. She decides to say something that will definitely interest him. Somewhere out of sight of the boy, Dee asked if he wanted to see the Toa again. Aaron was wary of hearing about his sister. She asked what he would do if she said she could save her. Aaron clenched his trembling fist in fury. Grinding his teeth from seething anger, he shouted that the dead cannot be brought back to life, but the girl interrupted him, saying that there was one way. Dee mentioned the king's treasure. If you find 12 treasures scattered around the world and combine them into one, you can gain the power of the gods, which can be used to revive the Toa. Aaron said ironically that he was wondering what she would give this time. Because of the story about the treasure, he decided that she was joking with him. The guy said that he would find and kill her. The girl continued to speak from the shadows about how treasures really exist. She asked if he knew that one of them was hidden in this place. Dia offers to help him, and together they will gain this power. The mysterious girl invites the main character to get out of here and find the rest of the treasures together, assuring him that she will help him because she knows a lot. While she tries to persuade him to cast aside his doubts, Aaron looks at the blonde with a menacing gaze. Dee hits him where it hurts with another question about whether he wants to see the Toa. Aaron quickly reaches out his hand with the intention of catching her. He suddenly grabs Dia by the neck and makes sure that now she definitely won't be able to escape, pointing a gun at her and threatening her to keep quiet. As the hand on her neck tightens ever tighter, the girl breaks into a creepy smile. In a sarcastic tone, Dee makes fun of the guy's facial expression and comments that it now looks much more cheerful, despite the fact that he has been thrown to the very bottom. Looking down on the protagonist, Dia with a creepy face claims that the guy is still convinced that she is just lying to him, but nevertheless, he has no choice but to cling to this lie. She asks Aaron what he thinks and if he has no reason to live on. With hopelessness in his eyes, the shocked guy got angry. He fired again and shouted at her not to make him laugh, but the girl disappeared again. While the protagonist stood and looked in the direction of the shot, she landed behind him. With a feigned annoyance on her face, she said that Aaron was getting on her nerves and that it was time for her to go. Then she asked him to remember something. Going deeper into the cave, she warned him that soon blood would be spilled in this place, and that fate had serious plans for him. The girl says that this is the last chance to make the right choice, and hopes that Aaron will change his mind. She asks him to live until the next time they meet. Shocked by what happened, Aaron covers his face with his hand and looks tensely in the direction of the one leaving. He turned to the lying Toa and thought about fate and whether he really had anything to live for. A silhouette in a red robe looks at the huge stone doors. The woman in the white raven mask thanks her master for the fact that thanks to his guidance, she found the way here. She says that their master is forgotten. Behind her, the rest of the people in warm clothes stand with their heads bowed, waiting for something. President Warden turns to Reverend Deeptooth and asks her what is buried here. She asks Varden if he knows why the excavations are being carried out here. The president hesitantly suggests that it is not for the extraction of Arma. The woman from the order confirms that rich deposits of these crystals have been discovered under the tree. However, there is something rarer in the depths of the plant. The president is interested. Looking at the stone gates, she continues to talk about a certain object, a talisman that towers over all of Arma. She calls it a gift from the gods. Touching the stone relief of the ancient gates, she speaks of one of the 12 treasures that sleeps behind them. Reverend Deeptooth says that the mine is just a conspiracy because the main goal was to find the gate. Warden confirms this and says in an uncertain tone that the president is very pleased with such a find. Varden turns to her and tells her about his misunderstanding about the door because they tried many ways to open the gate, but none of them were successful. Reverend Deeptooth assures that there is no need to worry about this. She turns to the president and says that certain conditions must be met to open the gate. Warden is surprised and asks again. The mysterious girl looked straight at him and in a chilling tone spoke about blood sacrifice. At that very second, a red blade pierced the president's body from behind. Meanwhile, she continued to say that all the blood in a person's body is needed to open the gate. Varden falls to his knees, not believing this outcome. The rest of the order attacks his guards from behind. The bodies of the president and his wards lie in front of the gates while the white raven looks at them. She says that life and the burden destined for them by fate are the price for opening the gates, and the payment is their spilled blood. The woman is sure that for the sake of a great goal, sacrifices are indispensable. The crow triumphantly proclaims that the president and his people are not enough to open the gates. The commander of the order says that everyone currently present in the mine must be sacrificed. She tells her subjects, a group of people in warm armor and masks, to get ready. The White Crow continues his monologue about how it is time to sacrifice lambs on this sacred land. These are sacrifices for their master. Someone is banging hard on the iron door with their hand. A crowd of hungry workers stands near the door, and one of them calls the guards to give them food. While one of them was cursing and continued to knock, the others were discussing that the absence of sentries was rather strange and had never happened before. They suspected that something had happened. The boy continued to beat furiously on the door. It made a dull sound. He complained about such conditions and believed that the guards were mocking them. The man was throwing insults and threatening to kick them when he got out, but the door suddenly opened. While the gates were opening, he did not have time to understand anything and froze in the same pose. He was scared and wondered what was going on, looking through the doorway. The other workers were standing nearby and were also perplexed. Suddenly, something rolled out of the opening with a dull sound. The others tried to see what it was. Seeing someone's head in front of them, someone from the crowd began to scream. One worker, shocked by what he saw, stammered and asked what was going on. The others stared at the red eyes that glowed in the darkness. At this moment, several strangers in iron masks, like the head of a crow, pulled out red swords and prepared for the slaughter. The armed men jumped into the crowd at the workers, who were still shocked by what was happening. One of them, running away, shouted for salvation, seeing a glowing red blade in front of him. The crows killed everyone they came across and caught up with those who fled. At that moment, one of the order, with one swing of two blades, cut the heads off the shoulders of two workers. One of the ravens took out a red-hot barrel and pointed it at the crowd. Several workers stood near the cliff and asked them not to come closer. The guys asked in a desperate voice what harm they had done to them. Realizing that this was the end for them, they pushed and argued about who would stand the farthest, but there was nowhere to go, because there was an abyss behind them. Without giving them a chance, the masked man mercilessly pointed a flamethrower at them. The fire set fire to several workers with a strong stream of flame and threw them back. On the other side of the cave, crows with swords were killing defenseless people. They cruelly pierced their bodies one after another. There were many bodies and blood left on the field of the unequal battle. One of the workers tried to escape but suddenly received a fiery shot in the back. There were two men with flamethrowers standing in the corridor. One of them was burning down the next room, while the other had just killed another victim. The flamethrower noticed two children sitting in the corner of a dark room. They were trying to hide among the bags and boxes of supplies without making a sound. Suddenly a man with a fire cannon appeared through the curtains. The children froze in fear and watched, awaiting their end. The raven suddenly started falling. Aaron appeared behind him and shot him in the head, saving those guys. The protagonist turned around abruptly as another enemy appeared behind him. Aaron took out an object from his belt behind his back and pressed a button. At the same second, he swung and threw it towards the armed killer. It was a small grenade. There was a loud explosion, and the air was filled with heat and fire, which was able to stop the enemies. Aaron, hiding from the explosion in a shelter behind the wall, cursed mentally. The protagonist reflected on what was happening. He noticed that everyone was being killed, regardless of their age. While thinking about who he had just killed, he noticed the children hiding. With tears in his eyes, one of the boys asked for help. At this moment, the protagonist remembered Dia's words about how much blood would soon be shed here and that a fate awaited him that he would not be able to avoid. He began to guess. Meanwhile, the silhouette in the red cloak was still standing in front of the stone gates. Crimson blood was flowing down the reliefs of the door to its very foot. The woman held out her armored hand under the dripping blood. She addressed God, asking if he heard their dying cries and if he saw their souls disappearing one by one. A gun with a blue crystal inside shoots a stream of light. The girl in red's mental address was a request to God to join the banquet. She spoke of a fire that would be in every corner of this holy place. Meanwhile, Aaron was shooting back at the enemies while the children were trying to escape. The main character, without turning around, threw grenades one after another into the crowd of enemies. The boy shouted at the children to run. Behind them, flashes of loud explosions shone. A black raven appeared on the children's path. Against the background of this, the Reverend Deeptooth continued to speak with God. After the prayer of ashes, she asked to accept their flesh and blood as a treat. Aaron turned around and noticed that the children's lives were in danger. The White Crow asked God to light their path. She finished her monologue by saying that a miracle would happen here. Suddenly a red sword pierced Aaron's body. The boy bravely covered the children with his body. After that, he began to receive stabbing blows one after another. Raven continued to thrust his sword into him mercilessly. Aaron screamed with all his might and resolutely attacked the enemy. He knocked his opponent onto his back and prepared to counter. While the bloody blade was still in the guy's body, he took out his knife and swung it at the masked man. After killing the Raven, he fell to his knees and grabbed his wound with his hand. A bloody cough was heard. Even in such circumstances, he thought of others, shouting to the children to immediately run away from here and under no circumstances to go that way. But the guy didn't have time to finish speaking before he saw another explosion in front of him and two bodies burning in flames. He was surrounded by a crowd of ravens in black cloaks with blades and flamethrowers. The gates are heard grinding, blood is still flowing down them, and they begin to open slowly. A crow in red addresses the king of forgotten names. The crow solemnly turned to God with a request to entrust her with the inheritance. The gates slowly open, revealing the light hidden behind them. The woman looks with admiration at what appears before her eyes. Meanwhile, the flamethrowers stand over the fallen and barely breathing main character. One of them steps on his chest. The killer pointed his gun at him and prepared to release a stream of flame. Aaron indulges in dying thoughts about his condition and the fact that death awaits him. Raising his hand with the last of his strength in anticipation of meeting the Toa, he notices that he is trembling. He is afraid of death. He promised himself to resign himself to death, but now he doubts. Aaron wants to live if he has any chance of salvation, and not look at the impartial face of the killer. The Reverend Deeptooth desperately denies what he saw. The bloody stone pedestal turned out to be empty. The crow began to guess that the door had been opened before her arrival and wondered where the treasure was. Meanwhile, numerous explosions were heard in the crowd of attackers. The protagonist lies down and watches the spectacle of his tormentors burning. Through the crowd of burning enemies, the silhouette of a girl can be seen. Di in a battlesuit hovers above Aaron. She says that it is time to make your choice. Extending her hand to him, she offers to take it if he wants to live and build his destiny anew, calling him a contractor. Di holds out his hand to the wounded protagonist amidst the chaos. The hand is like a burning ember found in the middle of a bitter winter. Aaron is flooded with memories. He remembered the fight accompanied by the cries of an angry crowd. It was 2 weeks ago. Aaron is standing at the end of the ring. There are shouts from behind to start a fight. A muscular man swings his fist at him. The fighter delivers a swift blow. Aaron dodges and ends up behind his opponent. A powerful hook with a characteristic sound flies into the opponent's cheek. Aaron takes hold of a confused fighter. A muscular opponent rams a guy with all his weight. The man begins to rain blows on Arena, asking him to give up while he tries to block them. However, the guy caught the right moment and delivered a deft kick right to the chin. Following this, another powerful roundhouse kick lands on the opponent's neck. To the delighted cries of the crowd, Aaron emerges victorious. Outside the ring, guards watch what is happening. They discuss the outcome of the battle and the defeat of such a strong fighter. The guards also paid attention to the winner, calling him a beast and surprised by his endurance since he had been fighting all day. They continue to discuss Aaron, wondering about his motivation and how much longer he can last. One of them stares at the guy. With a smirk on his face, he intervenes in the conversation and suggests that Aaron is not doing this of his own free will. His body is at its limit, but he has no other choice. He has something that he will protect at any cost. At the end of a huge cave sits a lonely silhouette. The girl responds because someone's voice sounded behind her, asking why she was sitting alone. Aaron happily showed her a surprise, a bag of food. Toa happily threw herself into her brother's arms. Aaron was surprised by the sudden embrace and asked if everything was okay, to which she fastidiously answered no. His sister interrogates him about where he was for so long and whether he got into a fight again, to which Aaron denies. Two guys come up from behind and tease the main character about his relationship with his sister. Unhappy with this encounter, Aaron asks why they are there. Continuing to banter, they say they were looking after the Toa while he was away and hint at getting dinner. Leaving his interlocutors in bewilderment, Aaron takes his sister away. The main character says that he didn't bring anything for them, and if they want to eat, then according to the rules they must get the food themselves. The boys were surprised why the rule didn't apply to Toa, to which the brother replied that it was obvious. She was his sister, and he cared about her. They continue to tease Aaron for his love for his sister, finally annoying him. The boy responds with humorous insults and asks to be left alone, while Toa stands in silent bewilderment. The sister approaches Aaron and thoughtfully offers to remove his overgrown hair. The protagonist refuses, which makes her angry. While the two continue to argue, the jokers stole the canned goods. Toa tied Aaron's hair in a ponytail. He is not very happy about it, but she is too stubborn. The sister looks happy when she takes care of her brother. She hopes that she looks prettier that way. The annoying guys return with food and continue to make fun of the sister lover through the slurping noise. This time, Eren couldn't take it anymore and attacked them while Toa watched their squabble. Night. The protagonist is lying on a hanging cot. Toa asks if he will do it again, but he does not understand what she is talking about. Sitting on the next bed, the sister worries about his participation in the battles. She is afraid that he might get hurt or die. Turning on his side, Eren replies that he will not give up, and it is all so that they have food. The girl doesn't like this. She wants to be useful and thinks that washing, cleaning, and collecting insects are not helpful. She considers herself useless because she cannot do what men do. For the stupid things she said, Eren pulled her cheek. He says that they are the same and everyone does what they can. In his opinion, their work is a chance to get out of here, and there is no need to think about anything else. She says in an upset tone that it still hurts her to watch. The girl carefully takes his battle-worn hand. The brother replies that everything is fine. Eren removes his hand and moves away, claiming that he is fine and not in pain, maybe just a little. The guy asks her not to worry while Toa's eyes are watering. The brother goes to bed and advises her to fall asleep quickly because tomorrow she will need a lot of strength. Before going to sleep, Toa remembers the landscape of snow-capped mountains. She dreams of seeing again the frozen waterfall, winter clouds, snow-covered mountains, and snow-white rabbits. When she was little, she always followed Eren. But then he told her the story of the king's treasure and what it could do. She has a wish, for the fulfillment of which she prays, to always be with Eren. Toa began to voice her thoughts out loud. She doubts that the wish can come true and suggests telling about what happened recently. The sister turns to Eren, but he is already asleep. Meanwhile, Varden holds a red stone in his hand, Arimu. He admires its beauty against the background of others. The gods say that a red stone has been discovered at the bottom of Zone N. The man orders them to deal with it starting tomorrow. The president says that there are people who will pay well for him, but one of the guards says that there might be problems with this. Warden asks about it. A man announced a report that said that out of 30 people tested, only 2 survived. The president is shocked by what he heard. In his story, the god talks about colonies of beetles that the workers saw. The president looks thoughtfully at the stone and talks about their extraction, labor force, and the fact that there are not enough people to clean it up. One of the men says that it is impossible to leave all this there. He continues and reports that there is cannon fodder that can handle this. Warden asks the sergeant if he has men for this job. The man answers yes with a grin. There are those who will easily jump into a hole. Events take place in the lower level of the mining zone. The 2 guys who had been pestering Eren earlier are standing with pickaxes at the edge of the cliff. One of them asks the other if he is scared. The man replies that it is creepy here. The man in glasses says that they are being dragged to another penal servitude. Eren silently follows them. There are also seasoned workers in special gear in the crowd. Eren looks at the miners and wonders where they come from. The boy reflects that without them, it would be harder to work. The overseer addresses the miners, asking if everything is in place. Behind the sergeant stand 2 more guards with guns loaded with blue stones. He orders to listen carefully because today's work is very important for the Empire. With a disdainful smirk on his face, he says that the workers' duty is to gather as many resources as possible. Eren looks at him silently. Loud sounds echo in the dark cave. The man holds a rock in his hand as an example and tells the workers that this ore is different from the usual arima. He points out that there are deposits under the rock, but they should be careful because they can explode when reacting with fire. The workers are surprised that these stones are here because this type of energy has 10 times more than ordinary arum. The sergeant announces that as a reward, the miners' terms will be reduced by 10 years. The workers are shocked by this news. The guard says that they are chosen and this is gratitude to them for their efforts and loyalty. There is a loud sound of a pickaxe hitting a stone surface. While working, Eren thought about why so many people were needed to mine the ore. He was confused by the too large reward for this. Arena is worried that they came down here without an escort. He thinks it's very suspicious. At this moment, one of the workers, who was standing nearby, mined his first red stone. The others gathered around him, not believing their eyes. One of them warns not to bring fire to the arima, otherwise it will explode. Meanwhile, another worker found ore. The miners find more arima one after another. The work is in full swing. Eren also found some crystals. The blue-haired guy voices his thoughts about how long they have been here and how much time they have left, although, in his opinion, it is worth it. Taking a pile of red stones in his hands, the protagonist voices his doubts. It seems to him that they are simply taking the bait. At this moment, The blue-haired guy notices something. One of the workers goes deep into the cave alone. The guy calls out to him, asking where he is going. He tells the man not to go so far, but he, on the contrary, calls them to come closer, because there are still many stones there. The blue-haired guy mutters, commenting on the actions of that miner. Meanwhile, something caught Aaron's attention. The main character heard a girl singing somewhere. The miner grabbed his pickaxe tightly and prepared to dig some more. While working, he says that these stones are easy to find because they glow brightly even in pitch darkness. The worker continues digging cheerfully. He is glad that he will not have to rot in prison for the rest of his life and that he finally has a chance to get out of here. Suddenly a black liquid splashed on him. This distracted him from his work. Rubbing his face with his sleeve, the guy stands in pitch darkness. He turns on the flashlight to see what it was. In front of him there are several giant creepy insects with a bunch of yellow eyes and fangs. The miners turn around at the guy's cry, wondering what's going on. The main character and his comrade run to help a miner lying on the ground. The blue-haired guy asks him what happened. The injured worker wants to warn them about something. The boy is shaking in horror. He barely says that there is something inside the cave. A man has lost an arm and a leg. From the darkness of a deep cave, tentacles reach out, holding his other leg. With his last strength, he tells himself to run. The monster pulled the miner's leg sharply. His last screams were heard. The blue-haired guy wants to rush to his comrade, but Aaron grabs him and stops him. There were huge, beetle-like monsters there. They had a real feast, devouring those who could not escape. The blue-haired guy and Aaron were in the epicenter of the carnage. They heard the dying screams and the crunch of the bodies of those who were captured. Toa looked up with a blank expression. The woman with red hair behind her asked what she was doing. Toa replied that she wanted to see Aaron soon. She couldn't believe that she had such a happy life. The women behind her were discussing her behavior and how it was not surprising, since she had come here at a young age. Toa continued to speak to herself and wondered why she had been feeling sad and restless lately. The girl looked down with a sad look. Meanwhile, Aaron fought furiously with the monster. He plunged a knife into one of its many eyes and blood spurted out. Suddenly another monster appeared behind him with a loud roar. The giant creature was about to fall on him with all its weight. Aaron crunched the pickaxe into the beetle's body. Turquoise blood poured out of the wound. A man noticed the guy pinned to the ground. The guy with glasses immediately stuck the pickaxe into the insect's head, thereby helping Aaron kill it. Aaron managed to get out. He and the remaining few survivors decided to escape from there. Since they were at the bottom of the cave, they had to use a rope to get up. One by one, they climbed out while a crowd of beetles gathered below. Before they could crawl up, several guards were waiting for them. A worker in a helmet started shouting at them to look down. The man asked for help, because there were still people there, and monsters were everywhere. The sergeant looked at him silently while he urged them to hurry up. The lookout asked where the stones they were mining were. This was clearly not what the miners expected to hear. The workers said that they had miraculously escaped from there, and that they had no time for stones now, since there were still plenty of people in danger below. The supervisor interrupted, saying that this was the wrong answer. The sergeant kicked 2 men down. They fell before they knew what was happening. As their cries grew quieter and quieter, the man in uniform said that they were of no value because they did not have what they needed. Aaron looked up in bewilderment and asked why they had stopped. The other workers shouted for those higher up to climb faster, but they replied that people were being thrown back down empty-handed. Others were indignant that it was too dangerous. The descent back was very long. Aaron's attention was drawn to the melody. He wondered what it meant. Behind the edge of the cliff, he noticed a huge monster surfing, unlike the others. It seemed to be looking straight at him with its small eyes. Someone's footsteps were heard. Several workers were returning. They all looked depressed. The other miners looked at them and discussed where they were from. As it turned out, many of them did not return, and those who did now looked like this. Toa watched them with confusion. While the others were talking about how there were casualties here every day, the girl tried to spot her brother in the crowd. Toa ran up to one of the new arrivals and asked if he had seen Aaron. The man looked at the girl angrily. He pushed her away and told her to get out of here. While Toa was about to ask another survivor, a voice addressed her. The girl turned around. It was Paul, Aaron's blue-haired comrade. The Toa rushed to him and began asking about her brother. The monster was rapidly approaching Aaron, who was still holding onto the rope. The man above him asked what it was and where it came from. He began to hurry. Aaron looked down and seemed to guess where the singing was coming from. The monster made a swift dash upward. The huge mouth was catching up with Aaron hanging on the rope. The monster crashed into the rock with a roar, causing a collapse. Aaron fell and began to fall down along with a pile of stones. Toa doesn't believe Paul's story about what happened to her brother. The sentry sergeant silently watches their conversation. Aaron lies unharmed on something soft. As he rises, he himself is surprised that he survived because he had just fallen from a great height. The guy notices that all this time he was lying on the monster's body. Aaron's knife is sticking out of it. The main character remembered that when he fell from the cliff, a stingray flew under him. Trying to devour Aaron, the monster turned straight towards him with its mouth open. However, the guy managed to turn around in flight and swung his knife at the monster. The monster began to fall along with him. Having taken the knife from the corpse, Aaron realized that the body of the stingray he had killed had softened his fall. He is still surprised that he had not broken a single bone. The protagonist turns around at the sudden sound of grinding. The cave is filled with the giant beetles he had seen earlier. As they crawl along the ground, stingrays fly over them. A huge nest of monsters can be seen above. From behind the rock behind which Aaron was hiding, the same huge monster that had thrown him off the rock appeared. The boy is amazed by the size of the creature. He still hears the strange song. Aaron noticed that he was in the monster's territory. He thought that it was all a setup and that everything was going too well to be true. The boy realized what situation he was in. He cursed, drawing his knees up. Aaron tries to cheer himself up and pull himself together. The boy thought about Toa and how something could happen to her without his presence. The thought of this infuriated him so much that he began to crack his knuckles. He would not allow anything to happen to her, so he had to get out of here. Aaron decided to look around. He noticed broken chains on the rock above. The guy decides to get to them, because it will be easier to get to the top. Aaron tries to come up with a distraction from the creatures to buy enough time. He looks at his inventory. He has a serrated knife and a couple of flash grenades. Suddenly, the main character's attention is drawn to several red stones located a couple of steps away from him. Aaron took a couple of crystals in his hand. In the endless stone tunnel, the name sounds Toa. This is Paul calling the girl, because roll call is about to begin. He is worried about her. The man starts yelling at her and saying that tears won't bring back the dead. He spat towards the exit and told her to accept it, because in such a place anything could happen to anyone. Toa sat in a stone corner in front of the candles and prayed. With tears in her eyes, the girl turned to someone and wondered why she could not hear his voice, and whether he could not hear her. She senses that Aaron is alive. The Toa asks for help. The girl asks to save her brother, when suddenly the silhouette of a sentry in uniform appears in the room by the door. She notices this and turns around abruptly. The warden asks why she is here all alone at such a late hour. The man smiled and took off his cap. The sergeant slowly approached her. The girl stood up and became wary. The guy told her not to be afraid, because he was not going to punish her for breaking curfew. He calmly approached her and said that he just wanted to talk. The girl was scared. The man placed his hand on her shoulder. The Toa looked away. The sergeant said what happened to her brother was terrible. His words could not comfort her, but he knew what it was like to lose family. He claims that she does not want to listen to what he says. The girl still stands silently. The warden tells her not to think too badly of him, because that's his job. He's sorry about what happened today. The man repeats once again that he is very sorry. He asks again if it is hard to be alone, and if she needs someone she can rely on. The man whispers in her ear that it would be hard for someone like her to survive in such a place, and that she would not last a day among all those men in the mine. He suddenly pulls Toa towards him and says that he will be her brother and become her family. The man hugs her and assures her that he will not allow anyone to touch her, and all she has to do is be in his arms. He says that in time she will get used to it. Toa clutches the stone in her hand. The girl says decisively that her only family is Aaron. She sharply hits the sergeant on the head with a stone. While he is lying on his knees and trying to come to his senses, Toa begins to run from the room. The girl jerks the door handle sharply, but it doesn't budge. Toa didn't expect the door to be closed. The unfortunate girl, in horror, calls for help. She leans against the door and calls for Paul or someone else to help, but a shadow approaches her from behind. The sergeant hit the girl and she fell to the floor. His tall figure towers over the unfortunate woman. The man takes off his jacket. Toa reminded him of the past, namely of his sister, about the same age. He continues to say that he had the same relationship as she had with Aaron. The Toa lies on the floor, shaking and sobbing. The sergeant mentions that one day she began to look at him differently, as if he were some kind of monster. A man suddenly grabs a girl by the hair from behind. He says in a creepy voice that he made sure she never looked at him like that again. The watchman closed his eyes and smiled. He hoped that she would not reject his love. He asked if she would do so. A hissing sound is heard in the silence. A flame ignites at the end of the rope. A little more, and the fire will reach 2 large bags filled with arima. In one of them there are 2 flash grenades. Suddenly the silence is broken by a loud explosion, and the area is illuminated by bright flashes. The workers heard a sound, and began to look around in fear. The roar caused stones to fall from the ceiling of the cave. Many came out of their stone rooms, not understanding what was happening. Someone shouted that there was an explosion and everyone needed to get out. Someone announced that it was from Zone N. The voice ordered to take the tools and follow him. It seems that Paul guesses what is going on. Rocks began to fall near the wooden door. The cave is cracking at the seams. The sergeant, sitting next to the defenseless Toa, suddenly heard a crash and raised his head. The door was suddenly opened by another warden. Seeing what was happening in the room, he asked forgiveness for such an unexpected visit. The sergeant began asking about what was going on here. The sergeant ordered him to gather all the officers and soldiers to find out what had happened. The man in uniform accepted the order. In a nearly unconscious state, the Toa addressed Aaron. The air quickly filled with heat, flames, and hot stones. The huge insects burned alive and emitted a piercing squeal. Aaron managed to grab hold of the stone relief, while the fire spread behind him. Looking down, he realized why they had been told to be careful with fire. The explosion was much bigger than expected. The guy was lucky, because another second, and he could have been fried. In the cave above Aaron, other rock deposits began to explode, creating loud sounds that echoed throughout the canyon. The guy, covering himself from the falling fragments, did not expect such a result, because soon the entire mine would blow up. Aaron decides to get out of here as soon as possible. The guy wonders if he'll be lucky again, because it would be bad if the big guy noticed him. Flames consume the monster. The monster slowly falls down the steep cliff. The guy finally crawled to the hanging chain. He tells himself to calm down, because he needs to grab on for sure and not jump off. While Aaron is hanging on the rocky ledges with difficulty and trying to reach out, large rocks fall above him, which could knock him off the wall at any moment. A hail of huge stones fell on the wall, causing a roar. From the all-consuming flames, a huge monster is still visible. He notices a man hanging on the wall. The monster is rapidly approaching Aaron. He was able to grab the chain with only one hand. The boy knows it's coming straight out of the fiery abyss. Explosions are still coming from behind it. Aaron realizes that the monster is too fast, and he needs to do something urgently. With his free hand, he searches for something in his bag. The guy was lucky because he found another grenade. Aaron activated it and threw it straight into the open mouth of the monster, which had almost caught up with him. The grenade hit the target exactly and began to light up with a bright flash. Another loud explosion is heard. Light rushes in all directions from its epicenter. The guy was still hanging on the chain and trying to catch his breath. The monster's body was no longer visible because of the fire. Aaron starts climbing the chain and analyzing the situation. He needs to focus on avoiding the rocks, otherwise he won't be able to get out in one piece. The boy notices something he should have climbed by now. He realizes that something is wrong. Suddenly he notices that his body is pierced through by a red thorn. Aaron clutches his wound and groans in pain as another creature appears behind him. It was a huge insect with a woman's torso and a monster's head. It wondered how a man dared to encroach on its domain and sacred place. The spider declared that she would destroy Aaron. The guy noticed that her voice did not match her size at all. He realized that he had only destroyed the shell and that the real form was before him. The monster waved his hand and sent a stream of air towards the guy. Numerous blows rained down on the protagonist's back. She asked him if he had figured out why he couldn't move. It was because she had pierced him with a nail laced with paralytic poison. With a terrible look, she declared that she would not kill him, because he would die a painful death, hanging here until hell overtook him. A hail of blows continued to rain down on the defenseless Aaron's back. The guy gritted his teeth from the unbearable and endless pain. Aaron cannot die in this place, for he has already come a long way. With his body torn to pieces and his back wounded, he grabbed the red bayonet with his free hand with his last strength. The spider, watching what was happening, was surprised by this. The monster was irritated by his attempts. She pointed her sharp claws at him, voicing that she would now finish him off. With a cry of wanting him dead, she dug her claws into the place where the boy was hanging. Aaron had already pulled out the poisoned spike and was able to dodge the attack by rising higher. The spider was shocked by what she saw because she thought it was impossible. The guy began to carefully descend, holding onto the chain and sliding down the stone slope. He jumped back and found himself behind the monster, swinging a sharp claw at her. Preparing to strike with all his might, Aaron screamed furiously. The guy pierced the spider's neck with her own claw. The monster clearly didn't expect that. At the entrance to the cave stood a crowd of people. The far part of the cave was illuminated by light. The man furiously ordered them to do something right now. He was unhappy that the others were doing nothing to protect the Araima. The uniformed guard tried to explain that it was dangerous to be there because the explosions were still going on. The soldier wanted to wait, but the general interrupted him because he did not want to delay. The commander turned furiously to the sergeant. The man began to ask him a lot of questions about where he had been and how he was going to explain the situation, since he was responsible for this place. The sergeant tried to apologize and ask for a little more time, but the major general decided to take matters into his own hands. The angry commander left, leaving the sergeant behind. He stated that he was very disappointed in him and that he would soon be punished. The watchman was frightened. The sergeant grimaced with anger and fear of his imminent fate. The president ordered the prisoners to be gathered to put out the fire because they had to save as much Arima as possible. The workers were also ordered to bring buckets and a pump. The miners stood at a loss with buckets to the side. They did not understand how to put out such a flame, given that the explosions did not even think of ending. While the workers were complaining among themselves, out of the corner of his eye, Paul noticed the silhouette of a running girl. With confidence on her face, Toa rushed somewhere very quickly. Paul recognized her. Another worker started shouting at her that they should wait here until the explosions stopped. The miners shouted after her and watched her actions. Paul looked confused. He grabbed a coil of rope from the ground and quickly ran after the girl. Meanwhile, Aaron thrust the bayonet through the monster's neck. The spider screamed in pain. In agony, she wondered how he could move, because she had stung him. The guy continued to pierce her neck deeper. The spider could not get used to the fact that a man could injure her. The shoots from her head began to cut through the air around the guy. They beat him from behind on his already torn back. In this way, the demon tried to throw him off because he was still clinging to her back. Still holding onto the red sting, the guy made a sharp turn to the other side. The spider became even more angry. She ordered him to get away, trying to swing her hand. Aaron realized that he could not hold on any longer, so he let go of the spear with paralytic poison. As he gained speed, he rolled along the creature's back at the same fast pace. As a result, the guy landed on the lower part of the monster's body. While breathing, Aaron thought about his defeat, because he was unable to injure his opponent enough. The spider pulled the sting out of her neck. She mocked the guy and thought she had already won. The protagonist tried to get up on his feet, but his body refused. He understood that this was his last chance. The monster continued to laugh at him, saying that she would now cruelly deal with him and eat him. The spider swings, preparing for another blow. The monster's attention is distracted by a sudden loud explosion. From there, a huge stream of lava begins to flow out. Magma flows down a steep cliff from various places where the roar was heard earlier. Aaron took advantage of the moment and rose to his feet. He, too, was surprised that the stones were melting. He realized that the heat from the explosions had turned them into magma. The boy grabbed the knife tightly. Lava slowly spreads to the lower part of the monster's body. The spider let out a piercing cry of pain. The flames of magma roast her torso, consuming her many limbs. The fire spread through the monster's eggs and larvae, beginning to melt them. The explosions reach the spider's body. The roar pushes the monster away while Aaron tries to stay on her and not fall. The blast wave pushed the monster towards the wall. It falls at high speed. The monster crashes into the rock. The red-hot bottom of the cave is almost completely covered with magma flowing down the walls. The spider remembered her childhood. She was given the name Serpentis. The silhouette in the hooded cloak appoints her as the guardian of the door. He says that he cast a spell on the door, but he still won't be able to drive out those who will come looking for it. That's why Serpentis' role is so important. The man turns around. Long blonde hair can be seen from under his hood. He says goodbye, leaving her with a heavy burden. Being seriously wounded, the spider turns her last thoughts to her master. As the flames consume her body and limbs, she regrets that this is the end, because for thousands of years she has guarded this place and waited for it. Meanwhile, the wounded and tired Aaron tries to get closer. He slowly crawls over the body of a dying monster, consumed by fire. With the last of his strength, the guy looked forward resolutely. Looking at him, Serpentis wondered what kind of burden lay on his shoulders that made him fight so hard. The scales of fate have decided that Aaron's life is more important than her duty. If that is true, then she is afraid of what will happen next. The determined protagonist approaches while Serpentis continues his dying thoughts. The guy firmly grips the handle of the knife and swings it. In the face of death in the form of a swinging guy, the spider mentally addresses Aaron. When the door opens, the protagonist will see what she was protecting him from. Aaron climbs up the cliff as explosions and magma flow around him. Wounded and tired, he clings with difficulty to the rocky terrain of the cave. Aaron thinks that he needs to move his arms and legs, but he doesn't even feel them. The guy is having thoughts about giving up. He doubts, because he has already been through a lot. All he can do is continue to hang like this. An avalanche of stones and rock fragments falls down with a crash. Aaron's hands cannot hold onto the stone ledges. The guy starts falling with the stones. He thought that the plan had already failed, and this was the second fall today. Before he could see his death, Aaron felt someone's hand and saw a familiar person. The sister came to save him. She is glad that she caught her brother. While the girl was happy with what she had managed to do, Aaron looked at her and couldn't believe his eyes. Toa noticed that her brother was covered in wounds again. She was worried about him all the time, and it was unclear what would have happened if she had not appeared here. Aaron still didn't understand how his sister ended up in such a place. The girl asked him to hold on to her and not let go while she tried to lift them. The main character realized what situation they were both in now, but he did not understand how she was supposed to lift him while she herself could barely hold on. Aaron got angry and started to bombard her with questions about what she was doing and how she got down here. While the girl was trying to hold on, her brother was scolding her and saying that he could have gotten out himself. Toa asked him to be quiet because she needed to concentrate. At that very moment, several stones fell on her head. Aaron was very scared for her and shouted her name. With blood on her forehead, Toa said that everything was fine and it was just a scratch. For this, her brother called her stupid. With a smile on her face, the girl said not to worry because she was holding them, but she was not prepared for it to be so hard. She realized that she should have trained more. Hanging over the sea of lava, Toa confidently said that they would cope, and the main thing was to hold out a little longer. Numerous explosions are still heard throughout the cave, and magma waterfalls are flowing down. A little more, and the rope they were holding onto would not hold and would break. The girl holds onto the rope with difficulty, holding the two of them together. Aaron thought about the bad, about how nothing would work out, and if this continued, Toa would die too. The guy thought that he had no choice and needed to try to convince her. He turned to his sister and told her not to be stubborn, because sooner or later they would die from an explosion or a fall. Aaron asked Toa to look at the situation soberly, because she is the only one who can get out of here, and for her it is suicide. The girl firmly told her not to say that. Toa wasn't going to listen to anything. She was serious. She felt uneasy because he always dealt with everything alone and didn't notice how it made her feel. The girl was trembling. She was bitter because her brother always did things his own way, because she never asked him to do so. Blood trickled down her abraded hand, staining the rope. The Toa declared that she would not allow this to happen again, and that she would do it her way today. Aaron didn't expect to hear this from his sister. He looked at her in a new way. A tear ran down her face. She asked her brother not to say anything. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted, because someone asked what they were doing there, leaving both of them perplexed. Paul stood heroically on the rocky slope and held onto the rope. The boys looked at him in surprise. The guy grinned and noticed that some kind of tragedy was happening and joked that he was about to cry his eyes out. Paul asked how long they would stare at him and if they wanted to burn alive here. Large stones fell with a crash into the very heart of the burning abyss, drowning in the flaming lava. The boys managed to get out. Aaron leaned on Toa and Paul ran next to him, while more explosions sounded behind them. They turned around. Paul thought he was crazy for deciding to go back to that hell again. The man called Aaron sick because he almost destroyed that place. He asked if he had been playing with fireworks there. Toa noted that this was not her brother's first mistake, as it was hard to deal with him when he acted tough. Aaron looked at his sister silently. He wondered if he had ever relied on the Toa like that before, considering it his duty to protect her. The guy thanked Paul for saving him, which made the man not believe his ears. Paul wondered if there was any sense in this situation. He wondered how Aaron had managed to survive, and why the Toa believed in it so much. The man wondered if there really was something supernatural about their relationship. Paul smiled at the thought that he himself was crazy for following them, because doing things that could shorten his life was not in his spirit. Suddenly, 2 blue flashes cut through the air. The bullets hit Paolo in the chest. No one had time to understand what had happened. The guy fell. Opposite him stood a man in uniform with a pistol in his hands. He smiled and wondered ironically how this happened if he wasn't aiming at him. As the brother and sister bent over their dying friend, the warden taunted them and decided which of them would be next. The impudent brat who had rejected his kindness, the insect who had burned the mine to ashes and made him look like a fool, or the parasite who had decided to join them. The distraught sergeant, pistol in hand, called them all scum. On the stone floor lay brutally murdered workers. Each of them was covered in blood and had wounds from cold weapons. The prisoner with a knife in his hand counted how much was left. The man asked if his opponent was okay, as he could barely stand on his feet. He noted that they only needed one survivor. The madman raised his hand with a bloody knife. He suggested that his opponent not to twitch and stand still for a bit. The man attacked him with a knife and explained that he wanted him dead. End of selection in Zone N. There is one survivor left. A skinny hand swings a bloody bat. The events take place 3 days before. Toa cries, holding Paul. He and Aaron cannot accept the death of their comrade. The sergeant watches what is happening. The warden turned to Aaron and said that he was not going to kill him so quickly. The boy became wary. The man considered him very special and wanted him to remember him well. Suddenly the sergeant kicked the guy in the head. While he was kicking the main character and thinking what else to do with him, the sister called her brother. The man was unhappy that the boy didn't die there and managed to get out. He continued to mock him while Aaron silently endured. The sergeant wanted to see despair and ordered to beg him for mercy. Toa shouted at him to stop and offered to beat her instead of Aaron. The man hit the girl emotionlessly. This time it was the brother who shouted his sister's name as the warden leaned over the Toa. He grabbed her by the hair and continued to mock Aaron. He noticed that Toa was the boy's weakness. The sergeant said that it was worth starting with her and suggested trying first. Suddenly they were interrupted by the general's voice. He noticed the commotion. While the man was angrily watching what was happening, a sergeant approached him. A man in uniform happily announced that he had just caught a criminal who had destroyed a deposit of precious stones. The general was surprised by what he heard. Paul is dead. Aaron looked sternly at his tormentors. The sergeant explained that this prisoner stayed there yesterday and returned only today after what happened. Therefore he is the cause of those explosions. The man offered to beat a confession out of the culprit. Aaron took out a shard of red stone. The men and the rest of the guards looked at him in fear. The guy knew what this stone was capable of. He brought a lighter to it. Aaron confidently said that he could send them all to hell with him. The guards pointed their rifles in his direction, but the general ordered them not to shoot or move. The protagonist's bag was filled to the brim with arima. The men looked at him warily. Aaron ordered them to release the Toa and retreat back. He threatened that if anyone moved, he would immediately set fire to the ore. The major general called him a cornered rat showing his teeth. He continued, saying that the boy could not move but dared to threaten them. The man asked what would happen if they put the girl down. The general asked him if he had any plan, and if he was thinking of just running away. Aaron became wary when he heard about his sister. The man noted that in Aaron's condition this was impossible. He asked if he knew about his term and about the future, where he and his sister would not be able to survive. The general asked him what would happen first. He would be shot, or he would set fire to the stone, inviting him to check. Aaron began to doubt his powers. He no longer thought that the situation was under his control. The boy thought about the outcome, and whether there was one where Toa would remain alive. He was ready to exchange her life for his. The general did not want to take any risks, so he wanted to offer something. The man asked what Aaron would do if the general could spare one of them. If Aaron releases Arima, the general will give him the opportunity to participate in the AZ arena. This is a battle royale between prisoners from zones A to Z. The last one standing is released. The fair-haired guard asked the sergeant if it would not be easier to execute the prisoners than to arrange such battles. He could not understand the major general. The sergeant replied that this was how the general kept everything under control, because when the number of problematic prisoners increased, he dealt with them all at once. It was easier to let them kill each other than to leave it to the guards. He asked the new guard if he knew what the funniest thing was, in that no one was forced to participate in the battle, they themselves chose it. The bodies of the dead participants are carried away by the guards. The sergeant called them idiots, because their longing for the outside world exceeds their fear of death. The man was sure that Aaron would not be able to pass this test. He would not survive tomorrow's final, because the most dangerous bastards from all the zones would be there. He was already dreaming that he would finally be able to see the end of this miserable family, while the new guy silently looked at him. Aaron sat behind bars in a dark cell, leaning against a cold wall. The boy took hold of the wound on his side. He thought about the poison and the fact that the pain did not go away because of the strain. He wondered how much longer he could live. Light was shining through the iron bars and illuminating the boy's face. He covered himself with his hand. Eren understood that it didn't matter now, because he wasn't the one who would live anyway. The boy turned to his sister and asked why she was not asleep yet. Toa sat silently in her cell, hugging her knees with her arms. The girl looked down at the floor with a downcast look. She asked her brother about what was going on outside. She was interested, because during the day she heard many voices, which disappeared one after another, and silence ensued. The girl guessed that something terrible was happening behind the walls. As they sat on either side of the same wall, Eren tried to make excuses as if nothing had happened, but the Toa did not believe him. The sister asked what happened on the day she lost consciousness. Paul died, but why are they still alive? She realized that Eren was not going to tell her. The girl reproaches him, because later he will say that she should be grateful to him for the fact that they did not die. The guy did not answer. Suddenly the clanking of iron bars was heard. Someone was hitting them with their hands. Eren asked his sister what she was doing. He asked her to stop. The girl lowered her hands from which blood was dripping. She could not bend any of the bars. She said that she didn't even have the strength to drag him up, while he was still risking his life behind her back. The Toa felt uneasy that her brother was covered in blood for the sake of her useless existence. There is only one thing she can do for him before she dies. Eren still sat there with a lifeless expression on his face. Two men stood in front of a stone gate while others worked behind them. Varden looked at the ceiling. He thought that after such explosions not a stone would be left standing. But instead of ruins there are stone gates. The sentry delivered the letter. The general asked what their answer was and ordered it to be read again. The man received instructions regarding an unknown object, the name of which is the Ancient Gate. According to the protocol for Class S objects, the main task should be to protect this gate. It was also mentioned there that first it is necessary to eliminate all interference and obstacles around the object, without thinking about losses. Further actions will remain secret. Crimson Crows will be sent to him immediately to take control of the situation. There was the signature of the Supreme Cardinal Trevian. The general asked if this was not strange. After all, the answer came in just today, and from at least the deputy head of the Brotherhood. He thought about the importance of the object, and that behind the gates there could be something that would affect the fate of the entire empire. Varden was worried about the possibility of interference, since they had not had any problems up until now. The man was pondering the unknown secrets of the underground world. The messenger asked if there would be any orders, to which the general asked a counter-question. The general said to let them know that the gates are already protected. He can only hope that the object will be more valuable than all the burnt arima. A man asked how things were going in the arena. The guard replied that it had been going on for about an hour. The Toa looked up. She had just heard a mysterious voice. The gate would open soon. Arena Finale Az. The arena was a multitude of stone pillars in a cave. Its two sides were separated by a cliff with a river at the bottom, across which there was a stone bridge. The air is cut by the sharp blade of an axe. The man swung at the red-haired girl, who dodged the blow with a jump. The girl deftly turns in the air. Thanks to a somersault, she found herself behind her opponent and stabbed the big guy in the body with a knife. The man didn't even have time to react before she landed behind him. He called her a sly rat and swung the axe again. At that very second, she wounded him again with the blade. The girl was laughing at him because the thug couldn't catch her. The man leaned against the pole and held his wound with his hand. Holding a bloody knife in her hand, she asked if he had anything else besides muscles. The muscular man froze in place. At that very moment, he fell. An arrow stuck out of his back, shot by the archer standing behind him. The girl looked at him. It seemed she was glad to meet such an opponent. She grabbed the handle of the knife more tightly and began to run towards him while he was taking aim. The man was absolutely calm. He considered her an idiot because she ran at him with only a knife. He was sure that she could do nothing against his arrow. The shot almost hit her, but the girl was able to dodge it again. In an instant, she reached the shooter with her knife at the ready. In an instant, the man lay dead. The girl did not consider the distance an advantage. She continues to voice her thoughts regarding the archer's defeat. Meanwhile, the silhouette that appeared agrees with her out loud. He was a muscular, tall guy. Being calm and carefree, he carries someone's head. He throws his head to the side and continues to approach. The girl mockingly says that the guy is looking for trouble. He doesn't care about her words. He says only one word. How many? The girl is perplexed by such a question. Smiling, he asks again how many she killed. In a proud pose, the woman replies that there are 4 and asks what business it is of his. The guy starts counting on his fingers for a long time and thinking. Asking again how many of them there are in this zone, he says that he killed 9, so if he kills her too, there will be 12 left. The girl prepares for a fight. She grips the knife tighter and mocks the guy as a boastful loser. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the arena, in the western sector, Aaron hides behind a stone column. There is a dead man under his feet. He thinks about how these guys are on different levels than yesterday. Bending over the dead man, the guy thinks that they are on the same level as him, or even better. The poison still hurts him, but more dangerously, it slows him down. He will be at a disadvantage if the battle drags on. Meanwhile, the muscular man's bloody hand holds the woman's hand. He is dissatisfied because he wanted to play longer. Turning to what remains of the girl, he complains that he barely touched her and the battle was over. Leaning over her head, he thinks that he can find the strongest here. As he leaves, he continues to reflect. He thought this place would be boring, but it's even better here than outside. Several guards have gathered in the watchroom. The sergeant is sitting on the sofa. One of them announces that there are 13 participants left. The board lookout yawns and asks Lieutenant Sunbei if the arena will be over by midnight. The lieutenant does not hear his speech. Being tired and sleep-deprived, he is impatiently awaiting the result. The silhouette of a fair-haired man on a stone column watches the tired Aaron. The protagonist walks with difficulty, coughing up blood. 2 more men are watching him, hiding behind the columns. The guy thinks that he should rest. Meanwhile, the observers peeked out from behind the shelter. The men use gestures to discuss Aaron's exhaustion and make a plan of attack. One of them will come from the left. Having gone around the large column from different sides, they prepared for the attack. The prisoners suddenly appeared from behind cover and swung their weapons, but Aaron was not there. Surprised that the guy can move so quickly in such a state, they look around, trying to find him, and in the meantime, the main character climbed up the column. The guy suddenly jumps on the back of one of them, knocking him to the ground and swings a knife. Taking aim at the second attacker, Aaron sarcastically asked who he thought was half corpse there. The man swings his spear, putting all his strength into the blow, but the protagonist deftly dodges and, finding himself on the side, prepares to counterattack. The blow landed on the handle of the enemy's weapon, trying to block the attack. The spear shaft could not withstand the onslaught and cracked. With his free hand, Aaron hit the man in the shoulder and, leaning on him, pressed him against the column. Having dealt with the prisoners, the main character tries to catch his breath. The men were making a lot of noise as they crept up behind him. Aaron is surprised by the attempt to work as a team, despite the fact that here it is every man for himself. The main character wondered what zones they were from. Looking closely at the back of the dead man, Aaron saw the letter H. He's from the same zone as the main character. The guy does not understand why this is so because there is one participant from each zone. He begins to suspect that something is wrong here. Meanwhile, a man stands behind him with a blade in his hand. A group of 5 armed men approached Aaron from behind. The one closest, with blades, asked if he would like to play with them too. Each of them was serious, looked menacing, and had his own special weapon. Looking at them, the main character guessed that the number of participants had increased, and there was no longer any point in counting the survivors. The only way to end this game is to get rid of all the extras. Aaron took hold of his weapon. The sergeant gloated and hoped that Aaron would like what he had set up. The girl sat on top of the cliff. She watched what was happening. It looked like Aaron could scatter them all by himself. She jumped down carefully, thinking that he might be useful. The man made a sharp thrust with the blade, but Aaron deftly dodged it. The cold weapon was a millimeter from his neck. While the main character quickly cut one opponent, another man swung an iron chain at him. Aaron managed to react. The guy grabbed the chain with his hand, leaving the attacker bewildered. The man with glasses was surprised by how the guy just grabbed her with his bare hand. Aaron was surrounded by rivals. They no longer looked so determined. The remaining ones discussed that they had lost 2. Now they were sure that they could handle the guy one-on-one. 3 thugs decided to attack together and deal with the main character, even though 2 of them were already dead. At that very moment, they made a dash and ran rapidly towards the guy. Aaron did not understand why they were acting together. As he parried the blows, he wondered if there was a rule he didn't know about. A girl with a halberd began to rapidly approach them along the cliff. Aaron seriously wounded one of the enemies and he flew down. A woman pushes herself away from a column and prepares to strike. She quickly jumped towards the guy, plunging her halberd into the ground. Aaron managed to dodge. He jumped towards the big guy who was ready to catch him. The man put all his strength into his hands and grabbed the guy. While holding back the main character, he shouted at the girl to kill the guy. She said to hold him, but then another girl landed from the cliff behind her. The warrior with the halberd fell. Aaron still couldn't get out. The big guy couldn't believe his eyes. Another ally had just died. The man fell. Aaron, being free, tries to cough. After the girl saved him, she began to approach. She looked at the guy with a slight smile, while Aaron no longer knew what else to expect. The girl said that she had been watching him for a long time and admired him, calling him Mister. The guy was surprised by the new nickname. She didn't want to butt in, but she couldn't sit still because these people were butting in. The girl didn't expect there to be rules, but she thought the basics were worth sticking to. The protagonist silently watched her with a distrustful look. The boy ignored her and walked the other way. He didn't understand what she was getting at. It didn't matter, because the game would only end when he survived. The girl said in a serious tone that he should understand what was going on before chatting. She went on to explain that these weren't just second-rate assassins, but a cleanup team that was constantly trained to hunt arena participants. They had been performing various tasks since the beginning. The guy thought about what he had heard. He asked how she knew this. The girl replied that she had tortured them into giving up this information. She concluded that the battle would not end until they killed these guys too. Aaron confirmed his suspicions. If this was true, then he was simply participating in a game set up by the sergeant, and all the odds were against him. He realized that he had been naive and that the Toa were in danger. The girl suggested joining forces. She thought that if everyone was working together, why shouldn't they do the same? Aaron asked if that was the reason for her help. The boy raised his blade. He said that he could handle it himself just fine and would spare her this time, so she better get lost. The girl looked at him seriously and did not understand how one could be so reckless. She said that she would have done the same before she got to the eastern sector. The guy was confused. The girl told about the butcher, who does not compare with other cleanup teams. She sat on a rock that towered over the blue river. The girl said that there was nothing more to do in the western part. The guy stood silently below. He looked at the corpse of one of the players. The poor guy had lost his legs. Aaron wondered if he had crawled here from another part of the bridge. He looked at the corpse, thinking that perhaps it would also be lying around somewhere nearby. The guy thought that when he kills someone, he becomes one step closer to death. He thought that it would be worth at least hiding the body. Aaron bent over the body and froze. It seemed the guy figured something out. His partner asked him what he was doing with the corpse. She assumed that the guy had killed him and that he had managed to crawl here, although he had not survived. Aaron cast a piercing glance at the girl. A little scared, she didn't understand why he was looking at her like that, since they were still on the same side. Saying that it didn't matter, the guy threw the corpse into the river. The girl asked him not to scare her with such a look anymore, and to tell her if something was wrong. She asked if he had done as she said, since the preparations had to be completed before the butcher arrived. The partners froze at the same time, noticing something. A silhouette was slowly approaching them across the stone bridge. A tall guy with black and white hair walked confidently towards them. The man raised his hand in greeting while Aaron and his partner watched warily. A sergeant without uniform entered the cell of a lonely Toa. He asked the girl how she was feeling. The man came to say goodbye since they would hardly see each other again. Toa told him not to come near. The girl confidently said that even though she was locked here, she still would not allow him to do anything, like that time. In the morning before leaving, Aaron told her about the sergeant's promise and that they would be able to leave tomorrow. The man listened silently. The Toa stood up. She would wait for her brother to return. The sergeant thought it was stupid. Leaning over, he asked the girl if she was sure that Aaron would really return. The sergeant mockingly said that she would never see him again, even if the earth split in two. The girl looked at him with hostility. The man smirked when the Toa replied that his words were simply lies. With a wild look, the sergeant reminded him of the promise. He would allow only one of them to live. Toa looked at him in shock. Her brother will have to decide who will survive. The sergeant asked the girl if the choice was not obvious, but first, Arena must be defeated in the arena. The man guessed that she didn't know about the arena either. He explained about the survival game where you have to kill the other participants. Toa looked down silently. Sunbae asked if she thought he was lying or not anymore. He asked her if she noticed the strong smell of blood coming from him. Tears appeared in the girl's eyes. Toa didn't understand why her brother didn't tell her about this. Is this all for her own good again? Is he going to disappear, carrying everything on his back? The sergeant was ironically surprised by such self-sacrifice of Aaron. He assured the girl that he would never come near them again. The man suddenly grabbed the Toa by the chin. He considered her a useless waste of air. The The girl tried to free herself. He asked her if she would continue to stare at the wall and wait for her brother to save her, because it was unfair. The sergeant took out a small pocket knife. He brought it to the Toa. The girl asked what he was doing. The sharp blade was a couple of centimeters from the crying girl's face. Aaron swings his blade, trying to wound his opponent. No matter how much he tried, the mysterious guy deftly dodged and repelled all his attacks. He was carefree, as if it was a game. The opponent grabbed the blade with one hand. Having shattered the sword into pieces with his bare hands, he replies that it is useless and that nothing like that can hurt him. The guy is getting ready to strike. Aaron doesn't understand what's happening. Having received a powerful blow to the stomach, the main character flies towards the cliff. The force of the blow was so strong that Arena was driven into a stone column. The opponent was happy to have eliminated another opponent. The girl was indignant because she had warned Aaron not to rush at him headlong. The enemy flexed his fingers and prepared himself because next on his way was a girl. She gripped the throwing knives tighter. As the butcher rapidly approached her, the girl immediately threw the knives in his direction. Without even blinking, the guy fought them off with his bare hands, without slowing down. He swung his hand towards the girl. The woman noticed that the opponent was very fast. At this moment, Aaron attacked the butcher with his foot, delivering a swift kick and a jump. Having rolled after the blow, the enemy lay on the stone floor. The girl was surprised that Aaron remained alive. The opponent thought it was strange that Aaron was able to get up after that. However, it is better for him. The enemy is pleased that the guy could still fight. Aaron grabbed his side with his hand. This blow cost the protagonist several ribs. He noticed that, nevertheless, after a blow with all his might, the enemy was in perfect order. Aaron realized that he couldn't cope alone, and his only choice was to follow the girl's plan. She was tired of this and hoped that he was finally convinced that she was right. The girl thought that everything was fine because it was not too late. Now it was their turn to attack. The enemy broke loose and rushed towards his partners. A knife blade damages a tightly stretched rope. The butcher quickly approaches the girl. Swinging his hand at the woman, his crazy gaze can be seen from under the opponent's bangs. The rope is finally cut. A pile of metal weapons tied together falls down. The butcher almost grabbed the girl by the neck. An hour earlier, various types of cold weapons fall to the ground with a clang. Aaron says that they won't have an advantage due to the amount of weapons and asks to explain why they need to collect them. Meanwhile, his partner thinks that there is still not enough. She looks up from the pile of metal and asks if he knows why the magma here is blue. This is because it is full of liquid arima. This is not uncommon in the mines here. When red-hot arima comes into contact with metal, a violent reaction occurs. To demonstrate this, the girl throws a sword into the abyss. You just need to count to 4 and there will be an explosion. A column of blue sparks rises behind your partner. As they are showered with small debris, she continues to comment and says that it looks like fireworks. Aaron, a little frightened by the surprise, asks what fireworks are. The girl doesn't understand what kind of wilderness he lived in, that he doesn't even know about it. Having stopped joking, Aaron became serious again and asked how this was supposed to help. With a sly look, the girl hints at what will happen to a large pile of metal if even a small piece of iron gave such an effect. Clothes damaged by burns from explosions are smoking. The butcher, shaken by what had happened, tries to understand what had happened. He could not see anything after the explosion. Swaying from shock, the enemy stands on his feet with difficulty. Still holding the knives at the ready, the girl reflects on the situation. Her neck was almost broken, but now he can't see. It wasn't for nothing that she was the bait. With deft movements of her hands, the woman throws both knives. The enemy, still stunned, had no time to react. The blades pierced the body. Slowly approaching, the girl addresses him with the words that now there is nowhere to run. The enraged partner has prepared more knives and threatens to turn the monster into a pincushion. Meanwhile, the enemy figured out why he was lured here. The butcher quickly rushed towards the woman, thinking that he had underestimated them in vain. The girl throws knives at a rapidly approaching enemy, but this does not stop him. Turning to the enemy, she says that she predicted his dash. However, she is not his only opponent, and he should watch his back. The enemy realized his mistake, but it was too late. From behind him, Aaron strikes suddenly and cuts the enemy's back. Another precise cut lands right across the butcher's face. The enemy staggers, trying to move away from the inflicted wounds. Aaron is convinced that his only invulnerable place is his hands. If the butcher's entire body were so strong, he wouldn't have dodged. Besides, his partner's daggers are still sticking out of him. Aaron realizes that he should strike again at his weak spot. The protagonist swings to deliver a fatal attack. The guy's blade quickly rushes towards the seemingly defenseless enemy. The ringing of metal cuts through the air. The man managed to block the attack with his hand, shattering the sword into pieces. Aaron didn't expect this, but the butcher predicted that the guy would aim for the neck. The enemy showed a creepy yellow eye that he had previously hidden behind his hair. He was very angry and said that he shouldn't have hit the obvious place. A sharp punch hits Arena in the side with a crunching sound. The girl sees her partner fall to the ground. Having prepared another weapon, she is unhappy that her partner missed such a chance. Suddenly, the girl's body is pierced through by two thrown objects. The butcher says that he's not only good at close combat, he just prefers it. He also complains that he didn't want to show them his scary other eye. Having come to his senses after the blow, Aaron realizes that the enemy threw his partner's own daggers at her, having pulled them out of his wounds. Turning the bloody knife in his hand, the enemy tells her that his hands are also special. That is why he pierced her body through and through, throwing the dagger. She essentially gave him a loaded rifle. After he finished his commentary, he threw away the dagger, citing that it was boring. Approaching Aaron, the butcher says that he is more interested in him, since few people have survived his two real blows. Swinging, the enraged opponent is going to put all his strength into this time. The main character dodged in time a powerful blow that shattered the bridge. In flight, among a pile of stones, Aaron cuts another rope. Another pile of tied weapons falls into the abyss. Another fountain of sparks flares up behind the stone bridge that has split in two. Covering himself with his hand, the butcher knew that Aaron would resort to this trick again. This time he is not blinded. These fireworks do not do much harm because they are too disorderly. The enemy's gaze caught the main character hanging on the second half of the bridge. As the enemy prepares to jump, he addresses Aaron in a sarcastic tone, asking why he is hanging there and if he is out of ideas. The butcher jumps up and gets ready to finish it off, because he's tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. With the rope in his teeth, Aaron remembers his partner's instructions: throw and count to 4. Another blast wave is heading straight for the butcher, flying over the abyss. As the explosion reaches the enemy, he realizes that the main character lured him here on purpose. A sparkling wave carries him and his cries away at a tremendous speed to a great height above the abyss of blue magma. Still hanging on the stone bridge, Aaron watches what is happening. The main character understood what fireworks mean and ironically admires their beauty. It was extremely risky, if only he hadn't miscalculated the timing. And if it weren't for that girl's idea, he wouldn't have been able to cope with it. While Aaron is discussing the battle, his partner approaches the edge of the bridge. In the guard room, they say that only 2 are left. Holding out a weapon, the guard suggests going down to them. Looking at the weapon, the sergeant thanks for the pistol. After all, he doesn't know who will survive. As the man puts on his uniform, the second sentry says it's obvious. The guard breaks into a smile. He tells the sergeant that he will mark the end of the arena. Through the arena of stone columns, there is an abyss with blue magma at the bottom. The cleaners live here just like regular prisoners, but once the arena starts, they are tasked with getting rid of all the participants. This time they were sent here too, but most of them were killed by that monster. A girl remembers hiding behind a wall from a butcher who had killed several people. Thus the hunters themselves became the prey. Aaron guessed that the girl's plan was to team up and take out the guy from Zone X, who wasn't part of the cleanup team. The protagonist voices that she was actually the cleaner. The guy sat down next to the wounded girl. It seemed to her that the guy was not surprised. Barely breathing, she asked if he knew it. Aaron admitted that he didn't know, but he guessed. It doesn't matter who is on the cleanup team and who isn't. He realized from the very beginning that everyone around him was an enemy. The half-dead girl called him boring and repeated the nickname Mr. again. She slowly closed her eyes, finally losing consciousness. Aaron thought to himself that he had already told her not to call him Mr. Suddenly the boy heard claps and turned towards the sound. A sergeant with guards approaches the protagonist. He claps and congratulates him because Aaron is the last survivor. The boy stood in the middle of the stone bridge as a group of guards approached him. Sergeant Sunbei admitted that he didn't expect this. He was sure that Aaron would give it his all, but he definitely wouldn't cope. The smug man pulled out his gun, saying it was time to end things. He couldn't imagine how his sister would feel about losing such a wonderful brother, if she could feel it. Aaron froze at his last words. With hatred in his eyes, he asked the man what he had done to the Toa. With disdain, the sergeant asked a counter-question about the boy's eyes. Are they like that because of all those people he killed? Aaron reminded him of the condition of the agreement, that he would not lay a finger on his sister. The man replied with a grin that he had been her older brother during his absence and had helped her come to terms with it. Sunbei said that there was no need to worry because he had taken good care of her. Hearing these words, Aaron felt despair. He was ready to attack at any second. With his weapon aimed, the sergeant asked if he had forgotten anything. The man reminded her that the guy was dying for her life. He had agreed to this, so if Eren attacked, the deal was over. The sergeant said that Eren had killed many people, and there was no point in giving up now. The protagonist could hardly contain his rage. Sunbei smiled and called the guy's expression funny. He will remember it for a long time. The sergeant said goodbye and said that he was glad to meet him. He took aim and practically pulled the trigger. But he failed. The pistol failed to fire, making the sergeant look like a fool. The man turned to his subjects and asked to exchange the pistol for a working one. With a smile, the blonde soldier said that his weapon was working, but it was made of arima, and it was prohibited in the arena. The sergeant asked in bewilderment what he was talking about, since the arena had already ended. Sunbei said to quickly give him the gun, to which the guy firmly replied that the arena was not over yet. There is one more participant left, a former sergeant. The letter Z appeared on the back of his uniform. The man still didn't understand what situation he was in. Fear and bewilderment were visible in his eyes. He asked which participant the guy was talking about, but he ignored him and replied that they would now find out who would win. Sunbei got angry when he called him a bastard and asked him again what he was talking about. Suddenly the man remembered the boy's words, that he was the one who would mark the end of the arena. He did not understand what this meant and began to approach the soldier, asking him if he had gone crazy. Before he could take a step, a blue beam struck a few centimeters from his foot. The blonde guy warned him that he would shoot if he continued walking. The sergeant cursed at him. Sunbei ordered the guards to seize the boy and take him out of here himself. The guards stood silently. The man shouted at them again. He called them useless and turned to the soldier. This guy just showed up here and he's already setting him up. The man threatened that he would not get away with it and that the command would not forgive him. The boy objected that he would never rebel against the command because he was not that stupid. The smug soldier smiled and said he was simply following orders. The major general promised him punishment. The sergeant realized everything, remembering the words that the general said that day. The soldier told him not to lose heart because he just needed to win, and if he could, he would get out of here alive. He pointed his finger at the one standing behind him. The man turned around in fear. Eren stood behind him, enraged. The boy's eyes were empty, but at the same time they burned with determination. The sergeant screamed. Everything was supposed to end differently. The sounds of cuts echoed in the stone wasteland. The soldier approached the body of the dead sergeant. He asked the dead man why he had to say so much. The guy addressed him by name and thanked him for everything. Then he turned to Eren. After all, he had won, and it was time to present the prize. The blonde boy asked about the choice between his life and his sister's life. Without thinking, the protagonist took the gun and put it to his chest. He told the soldier to pull the trigger. Eren resolutely repeated that long before this vile game, he had decided to save his sister's life. The guy said to shoot him and fulfill the promise if this soldier is not trash like the sergeant. The guard replied smugly that, unlike Sunbei, he was a man of his word. He admitted that this was why he couldn't kill him. Eren looked at him questioningly. The blonde guy said to follow him. A dead Toa lay behind the bars. There was a lot of blood around her and a knife lay next to her hand. The soldier said that it was too late when they found her, and it seemed that Sunbei did it. The brother's gaze was filled with pain and despair. Since the guy no longer has the opportunity to choose, he will live. The soldier patted him on the shoulder and congratulated him on the fact that he would soon be able to return to work. He will be able to serve his country further. Eren still stood there, not making a sound. He looked at his sister's body with a dead look. In the strange, sparkling world, Dee smiled as she looked at the exhausted boy. She ordered Eren to get up. Dee asked how much longer he would sleep. The protagonist looks blankly into Dia's sparkling eyes. Eren and Paul looked at the red stones. The main character was on the verge of death in a dangerous fight with a spider. Suddenly the boy was saved by his sister, holding him over the cliff. The main character threatens the guards that he will blow them all up. He sits with his sister on opposite sides of the same cell in the dungeon. A boy comes to a dead Toa and visits her in a stone room. He was surrounded by black crows with flamethrowers. At death, Dia extends her hand to him. What happened next? All his memories flashed before the boy. He woke up and saw a mysterious girl in front of him. Eren still didn't understand where he was, what had happened, or how much time had passed. He even seemed to have forgotten Dia's name, which she didn't like very much. The guy found himself in a place that belongs to Dia, in the fallen abyss. She was worried that Eren would die, but luckily the guy took her hand before he passed out. That's how they got here. Eren admitted that he didn't understand what was going on, and asked Dia what she was, a devil, a spirit, or just an annoying child? The girl replied that it was rude. She asked Aaron if he himself hadn't yet realized who she was. The girl proudly announced that she was a treasure, one of the 12 relics of the king from the very legend that Aaron had spoken about with his sister. Aaron asked about the treasure and seemed not to believe Dia. The guy admitted that he thought the treasure would be more impressive, and that a child like her couldn't be it. Dia didn't expect such impudence, and told him not to judge a book by its cover, because it was just her avatar. She explained that her real body could not return to the material world because of some ancient spell. Behind them, a huge statue can be seen on the mountain. With a howling sound, blue chains appear behind it. It was a stone monument, resembling a man in a mask covered in red runes. Aaron looked at it, fascinated. The girl was happy, because she had been waiting for this day for a long time. 3,431 years, 4 months and 3 days had passed, to be exact, and today her imprisonment in this terrible place would end because Aaron took her hand. Dee happily jumped around the guy because she was right that Aaron wanted to live. She thanked him for the fact that she would soon be free. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about and asked how it was connected with the fact that he took her hand. Aaron was sure that he could not help here and the treasure was wrong. Dee replied that Aaron had already done everything that was needed. All he needed to do was become her vessel. The girl touched his cheek and explained that the vessel was needed for her strength and energy, containing her entire being, and that the boy's body would become it. Dee smiled creepily, her eyes glowing red. Once she completely absorbed the vessel, she would be free, despite the spells. The main character finally realized why he was here. He asked again if she was going to take over his body. Dee confirmed it. Suddenly, Aaron knocked her hand away. The angry protagonist asked if she really thought he would agree to such a thing, only over his dead body. Aaron decided to leave. Turning in the other direction, he ordered to let him out of here. Suddenly, transparent blue chains grabbed his body with a metallic clang. They suddenly began to pull him in the opposite direction. The guy was chained to a stone wall. Flying closer, Dee said that when he got here, he had no choice. Suddenly, claws sank into Aaron's chest. They came from Dia's hair, who in the meantime told him to accept his fate because there was no turning back. The guy screamed furiously. The claws continued to tear apart the protagonist, seething with anger. Aaron couldn't understand what it was. Why, after 10 years in that hell, is some child trying to take his body? Why should he suffer so much? Tormented again, the boy asked Dia why him and what he did to deserve all this. He said to just let him die. Treasure smiled. She asked if he was curious. Why did she choose him of all people? To help Aaron understand, Dee suggests looking into his past. The protagonist turned to her while she continued to subdue him. Suddenly, a blurry and indistinct portal began to open in front of the guy, blinding him with its light. The Toa lies on the cold ground in the cell. There is a bloody blade on the floor. After what he saw, Aaron was in a cold sweat. He saw her again. The dream he had while he was unconscious showed the events of the past, and now Dee is going to show the truth that the guy did not know. Aaron asked what truth the girl was talking about, since he already knew what had happened. The boy gritted his teeth. It was the fault of the bastard he killed. In his opinion, the only truth was that he was an idiot who couldn't protect his family. He watched his sister suffer. She could not see anything, and it was painful for her. The girl called her mother. Aaron was surprised, because he thought that the sergeant had killed her. During this, she thought about her brother and that he was 20 times worse off than she was now. There were streams of blood on the girl's face. The Toa thought about his suffering alone and how she knew nothing about it. She was very sorry. Tears of sorrow and regret were running down the boy's cheeks. If they both can't survive and only one of them has a chance, it has to be Aaron. The girl decided so. Finally, she could do something. Blindly, her hand reached for the cold, bloody blade. Toa pointed the knife at her neck. Her hands were shaking. Aaron ordered to stop her, or at least to free him. In exchange, he even offered his body and soul. The girl listened smugly. Dee reminded that these were memories from the past, and the guy could only watch in despair the last seconds of her life. The girl was praying. She turned to the whispering voice and asked it to listen to her request. The boy reached out to her, but the strong chains did not allow him to move. The Toa asked to save Aaron. The girl asked me to look after him when she was gone. Despite the chains and their strong grip, the boy tried to get out and shouted to be freed. In tears and agony, he screamed at his sister not to do this. He called her at the top of his voice, but she did it anyway. The bloody blade lay near her body. Aaron couldn't resist Dia's power. With a crack, that power began to fill his body. Only one is destined for greatness. Then their blood will be shed, the seal on the door will fall, and it will open. The one whose blood is shed will choose who will be the vessel for the treasure. The silly story about treasure that the brother told his sister to console her became her only hope. That's why only she could hear her voice. In the end, Toa sacrificed her blood to Dia to save Aren, giving him the right to become his vessel. The transformation was still ongoing, the boy screaming furiously as his appearance was distorted. With an evil grin, Dia said not to be upset, because they were able to gain freedom after all. Now they will both live inside her, becoming her blood and flesh, forever. At the bottom of the rocky canyon, magma was burning. A red blade cut through the guard's back. The black crows cleared the area. There were human bodies everywhere. Clearing of Zone C complete. One of them requested the status of those responsible for the remaining zones. Through the crackle of the Black Raven's radio, a voice could be heard asking for reinforcements. The other party cannot be heard due to interference. Raven 4 requests a repeat transmission of data, but in response, hears only interference, and the speech on the other side is cut off. The signal is still unstable. After changing the frequency, it requests retransmission of data. The Raven's comrade asked where the other 4 were. Before they could understand what was happening, one of them received a blow to the back. The second one turned around in bewilderment. Through the mask behind him, he saw a bloodthirsty monster that looked like a man. The white crow held onto the gate and realized that someone had been here before her. She didn't think it was possible. After all, they would have had to fulfill one more condition, even after opening the door. Just think that there was someone here who knew so much. The crow wondered when the door had been opened at all. She touched the relief wall. The roots were not dry yet. The woman thought this was strange, because as soon as the treasure united with the vessel and left the ancient fields, the tree of the world would die. The commander began to think. Since it was alive, it meant that either the treasure had not left the dungeon, or it had not completely merged with the vessel. Suddenly the girl's thoughts were interrupted by a soldier. A voice could be heard from his radio. One of them was currently fighting an unknown entity. Judging by the appearance, this was their target, so he was requesting reinforcements. The voice repeated, "All units to Zone C. He once again requests urgent reinforcements." The crows fire barrages of rifles. Bright red flashes are heard in volleys. They were directed in one direction. One of the enemies said to hold the fire. Because of the smoke, the squad could not see their target. It was behind them. The creature killed them one by one. The order was received for close combat units to go on the attack. The demon killed everyone in his path. He had long gray hair, a dead look, and huge fangs that were bigger than his jaw. The crows rushed to attack. They must not let him get any closer. The group pointed their swords at the demon. The monster swung back in response. In an instant, he scattered them in different directions. The Black Raven watched the death of his comrades. They will have to take risks. He lifted the restrictions. An improved weapon appeared from his hand. The soldier uses all his firepower to neutralize the enemy. 2 fiery rockets cut through the air with a characteristic sound. They were aimed at the demon. As soon as he turned around at the red light, the shells crashed into him. The monster tried to cover himself from the bright flash. Dee sat on Aren's shoulders and called him stubborn, because he would feel better if he gave up his body. She wondered if it was all about hatred. She leaned down towards the guy and said that she was in no hurry, because to tame a wild horse you have to let it gallop until it gets tired. And on the day when she seizes the reins, the body will belong to her. The vessel screamed furiously with all its voice. Suddenly, the rifles in the hands of the ravens began to explode one after another. The treasure controlled the arena inside them. The demon quickly approached his victim and cut the air near the raven with his claws. The crows looked at what was happening, puzzled. With a crash, Aren killed one of their comrades. The white crow noticed something approaching her too quickly. That something was the body of one of the dead soldiers, which had crashed into the stone wall behind her. This meant that her guesses about the treasure and the vessel were correct. The air around the demon was cut by a red light. Where the vessel stood, there was a red line that split the ground where it stood into 2 parts. Deep Tooth said it was weak and the vessel wasn't complete yet. Is that all its power? She suggested that it was all about the vessel, because the unification process was delayed. The woman turned to the treasure and said that it had made the wrong choice. She would prove it by destroying the vessel. Deep Tooth quickly shortened the distance between her and the vessel. She attacked the demon, but he repelled her attack. The commander jumped away from the stone ledges and approached Aren. She swung the red blade again. The black crow saw the body of the vessel approaching the ground. The demon landed between the stones and tried to get to his feet. Before he could come to his senses, Deep Tooth was already in front of him. Dia was wondering how she could fight her with a mortal body. The outside world must have changed for the better while she was locked down there. Dee decides to get rid of her weapon first. Suddenly, the White Crow's weapon began to crackle. She realized that this was Ascension, the ability to control the byproduct of the treasure, Arimu. Dee didn't understand why she couldn't overload the stone in her weapon. Ascend has no effect on her red sword because the treasure has no control over the technical Arima. This Arima is man-made, but the disadvantage is that it is quite difficult to bring to perfection, so it is not suitable for mass production. Suddenly, a red beam passed through Aaron's body and the stone that was behind him. Then Deep Tooth half turned around, swinging her blade. Raven Shift, that's what she called it. Then with the spectral lotus spear, she attacked the demon once more. It was a very convenient and effective weapon against the treasure. The commander advised to be careful, because the sons of the gods are no longer the only ones with power in this world. People are already developed enough to use it. She touched Aaron. The girl said that his vessel does not reflect the essence of this power. Suddenly the guy moved some distance. The crow was left behind by the dusty road. The demon stood. The wounded parts of the body were instantly restored. The mask cracked. Deep Tooth was sure that she had cut off his right hand. The arena was surrounded by dead bodies of crows, and he absorbed their power. She guessed that one of his abilities was to absorb bodies and regenerate at their expense. Suddenly the demon began to attack her. The commander used Raven Shift again and deftly dodged his attacks. While Aaron stood in the center of the battlefield, she wanted to attack him from above. Before she could do this, the guy appeared behind her with lightning speed. The crow managed to block his attack. Her weapon shattered into small pieces. Aaron tried to attack again. The commander was shocked that the demon copied her Raven Shift. As it turned out, it was not a simple absorption. The demon mastered the spectral lotus spear and tried to attack the enemy, but she was able to dodge. Aaron's real body, trapped in the parallel world, had almost completely turned black and was making a crackling sound. The crow was pondering over the demon's ability to copy skills that use Arima. Red lightning started appearing around her. She wanted to make sure that the vessel wouldn't have time to recover because she would incinerate it. The girl threw lightning bolts in his direction, calling this technique Scarlet Thunder. They crashed into the ground and nothing could be seen because of the explosion. Deep Tooth will not let him complete the bond. If everything is burned, there will be nothing to absorb. That was her plan. This time she attacked Aaron with two techniques, Scarlet Thunder and White Lotus. Red lightning engulfed the vessel. Aaron could not regenerate. Hundreds of scarlet needles pierced every cell of his body. She thought it was time to leave the vessel. In another case, the crow will force you to do it. Suddenly a bright light appeared near Aaron's head. Dee happily announced that the adjustment was complete and thanked for the treat. At that moment, the White Crow was attacked by blue lightning. She didn't understand how he could copy the Scarlet Thunder, so the techniques he can absorb aren't limited to just Arima. Too careless, Dee asked if they had run out of tricks up their sleeves. They had improved enough to use force. At least Dee was 1,000 years ahead of her. The crow mask split in two. The treasure wanted to show its true power. The events take place in the capital of Trevienne, the Hasnal Palace. The man walked quickly towards the door. The maid noticed him. The girl tried to stop him, because now was not the time, but he drove her out of the way. Suddenly the door opened. A bearded man addressed Cardinal Lacrisi. The man's back was covered in bloody stripes, and women with whips stood nearby. They helped him up. The cardinal explained that it was time for him to pray. The man asked if that was true. The man heard that last week he received a report from the Eston mining camp about the ancient gate and sent the Crimson Crows and the commander there. A woman helped the cardinal get dressed. He explained that the matter required a quick decision, and so he gave the order without administrative approval. The cardinal asked if this was a problem, which the man confirmed. The cardinal ordered the women to leave. This was an opportunity to get another treasure, and he sent only one unit. The man called the cardinal frivolous because he did not say a word to his majesty. The grey-haired man asked if the minister did not trust the deep-toothed commander. The man replied that it was not about that. Capturing the treasure is a very difficult task. The minister was worried that information had leaked to the enemy. A report had just arrived about monsters that had been very well hidden before and were now heading towards the camp. It is necessary to call back the sacred army in the north and activate the other two treasures. If the enemy were to obtain another treasure, it would be terrible to think what losses there would be. The cardinal replied that so be it. The minister was angered by this answer. While he was drinking his drink, the man wanted to ask what he meant, but did not have time. He realized that the cardinal had done this on purpose. The grey-haired man stated that it was thanks to him that the information was definitely delivered to the enemy. The minister did not understand this decision, but the cardinal explained in a calm voice that it was in order to divert attention from the north. The man asked why the north was so important to him if treasures were some of the most powerful weapons. He asked the cardinal what was there. The blond man took a short pause and said that he would find out when the time came. That was all he could tell him now. Everything was done in order to get something even more important. The cardinal went to the window. He reported that the deep-tooth unit had failed and there was nothing that could be done. The man continued, a little more, and they would not be able to take their eyes off the guardians of rebellion. They are already full of suspicion. A frosty wind blew in the snowy mountains, chilling to the bone. On the white, clean ground lay the dead bodies of black ravens. The woman sat on a throne, surrounded by doll guards with red crosses on their chests. She was waiting for someone and they were late. The girl wondered if they were weak or just lazy. Behind the throne, the guards fell dead and burned in the fire. It was the embodiment of sloth that had arrived. The woman noticed his presence. At that very moment, a man with a wide smile appeared behind her. He said that these beautiful dolls were made for the fire in such cold weather. The man addressed her by her name Espina and complimented her on her breasts. He asked with a smile why she was alone, because he thought they were waiting for each other. Suddenly a cold breeze blew and the fire instantly went out. For the first time in this time, the woman spoke. In a cold voice she addressed Valatro and noted that he remained the same rude man. The guy jumped down and told her not to frown, because today was a beautiful day. He was glad, because today their new relative would be reborn. He said that she should smile. Espina believed that it was too early to smile, because they did not yet know what fate the 11th heir to the throne would choose. They are here to know what measures to take, based on whether he chooses them or the people. Valatro asked if it mattered if they were going to have fun anyway. The girl remained silent. She didn't know why the boy had answered the call this time, but it turned out he was there to see what the dice would throw. Espina called him a clown, to which he smirked. They looked down the abyss. By the way, Valatro said that he didn't see many people. He thought they would come running here like hyenas. The girl assumed that they were up to something. They probably wanted to get everything without any fights. Espina is sure that's why they leaked the information. The guy called them boring. He showed a wide smile and pointed his finger somewhere into the distance. He had a feeling that this one would be on the other side. The girl asked if it was intuition. Valatro confirmed. Espina noted that his intuition never failed him, whether it was something good or bad. They were curious what it would be like. Deep-Tooth jumped quickly from one support to another, getting closer and closer to the vessel. Wings of red blades appeared behind the crow's back, and in her hand was another one. She was ready to strike the creature. The demon dodged the powerful blow, at the same time tearing off her arm. The woman tried to catch her breath and looked at the severed limb. The commander was floating in the air. The vessel stood before her. Dee happily justified herself for not being able to hold on to the power. She wanted to play some more so much. The raven guessed that it was playing with her. Deep-Tooth pondered his behavior. He seemed to be hinting that he could kill her whenever he wanted. That meant he was staying here for a reason. Dee hugged the guy's hanging body. She turned to Aaron. It seemed he was ready to accept her. Treasure thought to play a little with the crow to calm the boy's mind. This is another important step to improving their body. D.I. embedded the tail key into his body. Non-lethal damage, then adaptation. Through this repeated process, she would absorb Aaron's consciousness and gain complete control over him. The wall the guy was hanging on began to creak, and his body ended up in the middle of a red circle. Suddenly an explosion appeared in front of the white crow. The treasure completely engulfed Aaron and took over his body. Deep-Tooth noticed that something had changed in him, but she didn't understand what exactly. In the new body, the treasure raised its hand and tried to move it. This is what is called a body. She created a blue sphere near herself. At that moment, Deep-Tooth received many strong attacks. She fell to the ground. The crow was surprised because he had thrown her away with just one wave of his hand. She asked herself many questions. Was the fusion complete? But what was more important, what is this dangerous feature? Is this the real power of the treasure? The crow was still lying on the stony ground. She looked at the exit on the other side of her. The creature was slowly approaching her. Deep-Tooth's strength would not be enough. She had a plan if she could not obtain or kill the vessel. Suddenly the crow pointed its hand towards the treasure. Dee immediately caught her and held her tightly. The crow's hand began to make sounds and heat up. Steam came out of it. At the same second there was a loud explosion. Her plan worked and she decided to escape. Deep-Tooth found herself in an iron elevator. It's almost 5 kilometers from here to the surface. If she goes up and breaks the elevator, it will block the entrance, and thus she will buy herself some time. Then she just needs to wait for reinforcements and hold out until then. While the crow was rising, a flame was burning under the elevator. A vessel was rapidly approaching her. An explosion was heard in a large snowy tree. The crow's body was thrown back by the explosion. She landed with the same crash. Velatro noticed this explosion from afar. The world he remembered was vast and completely green. It had been a long time since he had been imprisoned, but it was still as beautiful as ever. The boy wished the Toa could see this. Suddenly he found tears coming from his eyes. Dee didn't understand what he just said. Was he crying? He remained silent because he considered it impossible. Dee was approaching the final boundary of the spell. The treasure was one step before the red line. The creature laughed. She was sure those bastards thought they could keep her locked up here forever. If they were still alive, she wished they could see her take that step. No one could stop her now. Dee was reborn. She almost crossed the red line. Suddenly, in a parallel world, someone grabbed the treasure by the leg. It was Aaron's hand. The guy won't let her leave this world. On the stone sat someone in a mask, wrapped in a long cloak. Around him sat various animals and birds. In one moment they all flew away in different directions. Deep Tooth leaned against a tree and tried to get up. Travers was destroyed. The double claw is destroyed and her lung function is reduced to half. The crow's body was 80% exhausted. She saw her goal, the treasure, standing one step away from the outline of the red circle. The commander did not understand why he could not cross the border, because the edge was very close. Dee asked why Aaron was doing this and bothering her. The guy was still holding her leg tightly. Dee thought his consciousness had been completely absorbed, but Aaron still maintained his form. The girl noticed that he was still continuing to separate. This means that the guy has some goal that does not allow him to dissolve. She asked Aaron if he felt sorry for himself, and that was precisely why he could not let her go. Aaron had already tasted the blood of his enemies. Dee wondered if he had forgotten how he had torn them apart with his own hands. She asked the question, is it not enough for Arena? Does he want more? Dee said she would help the guy. All he had to do was quietly watch inside her. Aaron clarified whether he was satisfied. The guy started talking about what he wants, no, what he hates. Dee didn't understand how Aaron could still speak in such a state. Treasure thought that she couldn't hold back any longer. As soon as she had the chance, she would rip his consciousness apart and stuff him into her body. Suddenly Aaron grabbed the treasure by the neck. Aaron lifted her into the air. Dee didn't understand what was happening. The guy was convinced that the one he wanted to kill was Dee. Everything lit up with yellow lightning. Aaron wanted to regain control. Treasure was shocked that he was angry with her all the time. Aaron regained control of the vessel. Dee got angry, calling him a pathetic little human. The yellow lightning changed to red. The girl fought back. She was angry. She didn't understand how he dared because he was just a vessel. Aaron's hatred cannot compare to her 1,000 years of waiting in confinement. A bullet hit the creature's body. The commander shot at him. The vessel was still standing in front of the border. Deep Tooth was not satisfied with what was happening before her eyes, even though she understood that this shot was useless. Dee felt pain. This wound distracted him. At this point, Aaron was able to take control. The guy screamed and grabbed the treasure's neck even tighter. Aaron's power pushed Dia away. Dee understood that if Aaron crossed the border now, it wouldn't be him. Aaron approached the red circle. Dee couldn't let this happen. Suddenly a rumble was heard in the snowy wasteland. The boy's body lay on the snowy ground. Espina and Velatro looked down. They watched all the events. The girl asked what happened because he became human again. The giant from the forest appeared behind her. He said that the fusion was complete, but it was not perfect, because the control over the vessel was changing. The half-melted candle hardened in an instant, spilled with ice water. She didn't know that Kren, the gardener, was already there. Velatro bet that he was communicating with his animal friends again. The gardener said that the vessel must be destroyed. Human intelligence controls the vessel. This is a critical weakness. No one knows what changes it will bring to their plans. The giant held the rusty blade in his hand. They must destroy and recreate the vessel right now. Velatro created a flaming weapon. The gardener asked him what this meant. The guy explained that this is the main reason for their existence, to do what they want. He firmly stated that he was against this decision. Velatro swung his blade. He said that things don't always go according to plan. If you look closely, even the best network has nodes. If chaos rules, who cares about a single node? Aaron walked on a blanket of snow. A being that makes an imperfect system even more perfect. Velatro felt that this would be an interesting story. He suggested leaving the man alone because it would be fun. Kren thought that now was not the time for his whims. They had no idea what to expect from him, and Velatro wanted to leave him alone. The giant called the boy a foolish child. He smiled grimly in response. Velatro had merely offered another point of view, and if the gardener didn't like it, he could always fight him. Velatro is sure that he will not lose to him. Having said this, he hinted at a duel. The gardener took out his cleaver and they crossed blades. Espina sighed. What are they doing? Suddenly the gardener put away the blade. He turned and walked away. Velatro began to joke that he was scared. The girl looked at him silently. She turned and looked after the giant. The gardener always chooses the most appropriate option. That's why he was called here. The girl agreed with his idea that leaving him alone was not the best idea. Velatro said that he was not quite at peace. The girl looked at him questioningly. The mysterious guy said that he would watch the man. He was sure that he would bring them good fruits. The guy asked to believe him because that's what his intuition tells him. The events take place a month later. It is a moonlit night outside. The border of Haraj in the northernmost part of the continent. Trevian barracks? A smoking man in uniform asked if there was still no signal. One of the men replied that there was not. Crestofol, commander of the Second Corps, admitted that he was tormented by vague doubts. He pointed to the model map on his desk with his pointer. He didn't think there would be a gap in the Northwest Collector. One of the men began to speak. Although the source is unreliable, they have reports that confirm its authenticity. He assured them that their efforts would soon pay off. As soon as their forces penetrated and planted the bomb, they would give the signal. At dawn, it would be detonated remotely, and as soon as the walls fell, they would attack with their entire army. The man was sure that those tenacious bastards would not be able to resist. The commander reminded him that a month had already passed. A month has passed since they went into this wilderness to deal with the savages, who knew that they would be a hindrance. Cristofol said he had about a week left. The cardinal must have exhausted his patience. He asked about Kalos and whether he refused to fight. The second man confirmed this. People should resolve their differences themselves. He says this over and over again and says he doesn't want to be involved. The commander called him a tool of God, but because of his stubbornness, they have a hard time. Tools are there to be used. Cristofol decided that as soon as the expedition was over, he should take care of it properly. Suddenly there was an explosion. He and two other men left the barracks. They looked at the glowing blue sky. There was a bright signal in it. The commander noticed him. It seems the plan was a success. The man asked to wait and turned to the commander because the signal was not from their side. Suddenly someone plunged a blade into the back of the head of one of the soldiers. A massacre began in the camp. Unknown persons attacked people in uniform. One of the soldiers began to shout that it was an enemy ambush. The commander did not understand what was happening. How could there be an ambush inside the camp? A man with a bloody blade approached him. The fair-haired woman asked if he was the commander of the army. In front of him, in the cold, stood a silhouette with a katana in his hands. The commander said decisively that by removing his head, she would end the war. The woman prepared for battle. In the middle of the tents, a boy attacked a man and tried to defeat him. He got to kill him, and he looked at his lifeless body. Suddenly, the blue-haired boy received a blow. He was shot by a soldier because he killed Billy. The mustachioed man called him a parasite and told him to die. Before he could fire again, a katana pierced him through and through. There was a man standing behind him. The boy looked up in fear. The man called the boy Finn and asked if he was okay. Luda told him not to relax, and he found himself on the verge of death. The man asked if the boy understood why he told Ilya that he was not ready. Finn apologized. The trumpet made a piercing long sound. The blonde announced that the commander was dead and it was time for everyone to move to her position. Through the dead bodies in the snow, the people in black cloaks began to leave. The remaining soldiers were ordered not to let them leave alive. The men in black created magical blue discs on their hands. The commander called Lumi. The guy said that everyone was in position. The blonde turned to Josun and said that it was time. A bright glow appeared above the camp, reaching up to the sky. One of the soldiers asked if they had disappeared, since he knew that one of them could use teleportation. A silhouette stood among the trees and watched what was happening. Rabbit Kalos Kerensky, a treasure that cooperates with Trevian, thought that the soldiers were pretty beaten up. He reflected on the fact that it only took one ambush to kill their commander, and apparently the enemy had a strong leader. They outplayed them by spreading false information, thereby maximizing their advantage by sending a small detachment. The rabbit thought that this battle would be very difficult for them. Even so, he did not plan to help. The guy looked down. Apparently they were here for a long time. He wondered how Frida was doing. He heard that she was heading south. Kylos looked to the side. His attention was drawn to a dark figure standing on the snowy rise. A man in black winter clothes looked down. The rabbit looked at him with interest. He wondered about his origin, and whether he was a man of these lands. No, because if he was a man, he would have felt him from here. People's shouts could be heard from the bar. They were happy about their 5th victory, and that they had taught their enemies a lesson. Luda suddenly came up behind Finn and he got scared. Other people drank to Finn becoming a man. Having killed the enemy, the boy became a true Karajan soldier, and Luda invited him to drink the entire mug in honor of this. According to the man's words, the soldier must drink it all. Finn took sip after sip. Suddenly their drinking was interrupted by someone's voice. He said that a soldier must know that it is forbidden to get drunk during war. The commander smiled and looked kindly at the guys. The boy called the girl Elijah and ran to her. Ilya hugged him and praised him for fighting well in his first battle. She asked how his leg was, and if he was badly hurt, to which he replied that he was fine. The rest of the crowd discussed them and envied the boy. The girl asked if they had any casualties. Lumi replied that they had none, except for 5 wounded. If they had not believed that information, their main forces would have been in the camp. They have many more losses. Someone's hand touched Elijah. She screamed. Luda told the girl that she was not reading the atmosphere well. The man said that because of her, everyone was upset. Ilya hit him. Luda and the others continued to rejoice in their victory because they were able to defeat the imperial upstarts. They thought that the death of their commander would teach them not to meddle in other people's lands. They deserved it. Did the enemy really think that they would sit in the fortress? They drank to Harajina's long years. Ilya sighed. The girl looked out the window with concern. It was a winter night outside. Finn asked her what happened. Ilya stroked his hair and said that it was okay. She would go out for some fresh air. A cold wind howls near the stone fortress. A man in black made his way into her neighborhood. Aaron took off his hood. He finally did it. The guy covered his mouth with his hand and swallowed blood. Aaron looked at the bag. Only 7 doses left. The guy thought that only a month had passed, and they were already running out. He hoped that the one he was looking for would be found before the doses ran out. Looking at the town, he wondered where to start, because this place is very quiet, and it is much larger than it seemed at first glance. He was lucky that there was no one around, so he didn't have to sneak. Suddenly something cut through the snow on the floor in front of the guy's feet. Aaron looked up warily. On the roof of one of the houses stood a girl with a katana. Ilya told him not to even mention that he was lost, because she wouldn't believe it. Judging by his clothes, he's not an imperial assassin. In a strange village, strangers are not allowed to enter. The girl told him to leave right now, and she would let him live. However, she warned that if he came closer, next time she would not miss. Aaron looked at her. He did not expect a woman to appear in front of him. He wondered where she was from, because he was sure he was being quiet. How did she find him? The guy sighed and tried to explain. He wasn't here to cause trouble. He needs to find someone. Since strangers are not allowed in, he entered here secretly. Elijah asked who he was looking for. The guy said the name Josun. The girl became wary. Aaron heard that he was here in Harajin, the northernmost part of the continent. He could not say why he was looking for him. The girl thought and tried to remember. The guy told her that if she didn't know anything, then she should pretend she hadn't seen him. He wouldn't want to kill a woman. Elijah said that she knew him. Aaron asked if it was true. She was unhappy with what the guy said, because he doubted her strength. Who else would kill whom here? Suddenly she swung her blade and the guy jumped to the side. The wall behind Aaron split in 2. In her opinion, the guy spoke as if he could really hurt someone. Ilya was irritated by such arrogance. Aaron got angry and asked if she wanted to die. The girl prepared herself. If he could at least touch her, she would tell him where to find Josun. Among the houses and streets stood a blue-haired boy. Finn was surprised by the silence in the village, despite the fact that it was on alert. He remembered Elijah's words and where she might be, since she had not been seen for a long time. Coming closer, the boy heard the clanging of blades. Aaron and Ilya fought on the rooftops. The girl swung her katana. Finn recognized her. The weapon shattered the roof. Aaron deftly dodged its blow again. The boy tried to understand what was happening. Was Elijah fighting an intruder? Just as Finn wanted to go back and tell everyone, several people appeared behind him. It was Luda. The man asked him if he was looking for them. The boy did not understand how they understood. As it turned out, Elijah called them. Lumi explained the ability to exchange thoughts. This is possible for those who can control Chara. The man at the side explained that the ability is called Unho. He said that all more or less experienced soldiers can use Unho. He demonstrated, and the girl standing next to him said not to send vulgarity. Watching the battle, Luda said that the guy was unlucky to get caught by Ilya. He assumed that the invader would last for 3 minutes at most. The man didn't know who the guy was, but he clearly pissed off the girl. The man with the scar on half his face who was standing next to him said that the guy looked familiar. He remembered seeing him near the gate a couple of days ago. A sharp blade tore a piece of fabric. Ilya touched Aaron's elbow. But the girl did not hurt him. She thought about the metal protection on his hands. Ilya hit the guy again. Dee asked if Aaron would continue to be hit and run. Treasure said to just rip her to shreds. It was so easy. Aaron told her to shut up. Elijah stopped attacking and froze. She asked who he was addressing since she had not said anything. The fight dragged on. Arena must not be hit, otherwise the village will turn into hell. The rabbit looked at the night sky and chewed something. Sweet rice cakes are especially good under the moon. He leaned over the basket to get another one, but they were all gone. Suddenly another basket full of sweets appeared in front of him. The man in the hat heard that he liked it. The treasure thanked him. Kalos asked his name again. The man introduced himself as Leonardhound. While the boy was eating the cakes, the man realized that the cardinal's right hand had come such a long way here. They sat on a stone mountain above the snowy camp. Commander Crestofol had another week to complete his mission, and if Leonardhound had known, he would have arrived much sooner. The man asked if the treasure had watched their troops attack. Leonardhound asked how many times he could be told that this was a dereliction of duty. The rabbit explained that the treasures were needed to protect humanity from special threats, and not for their participation in human squabbles. And anyway, he's only in the Empire because he was offered this vessel. There's a good chance he'll run into 7 traitors. The treasure confidently said that he would destroy them. The man confirmed this, saying that this is what they most expected from him. The rabbit admired the treat. The Leonardhound asked if he had eaten it all. The man thought about what he heard, the protection of humanity. According to him, the Trevian Empire currently controls the continent. Castile, Terce and Aesom, but they do not have the greatest influence, and the Empire is the center of balance. The man asked if cooperating with the Empire was not the same as his reason for existing. The rabbit warned that the man would not be able to fool his brain with his flawed logic. Inventing reasons for invading neighboring countries in order to enslave large numbers of people and increase imperial power is an abuse of power. Treasure turned and began to leave. For now he would close his eyes to this, but if he noticed that the Empire would go against the interests of the people, his blade would be directed in their direction. The man explained that these are all politicians and people are in a difficult situation. Although, according to him, such a thing might seem unimportant to the guy. By the way, Kalos asked why, of all the people, Leonardhound was here. If they wanted him to fight in the war, they should have sent Frida instead of a man. She would have at least had a 1% better chance of convincing him. Leonardhound noticed that the rabbit was the only one who called Commissioner Deeptooth by name. The man stated that she had encountered some kind of problem, as had the Crimson Crow Squad in general. Treasure was shocked by what he heard. The mission failed and she was seriously injured. They are trying to patch her up, but it is not yet known when she will fully recover, and whether she will be able to. The man did not confront him with the fact earlier because he did not want to bother him. The rabbit did not believe his words. He considered it impossible. Frida is not weak. He wondered what kind of task this was. The Leonardhound looked into the distance. He said that these were human affairs and asked the rabbit if it interested him. Treasure clicked his teeth. At that moment a bright light appeared near his hand. The rabbit created a huge weapon. The hammer was several times larger and taller than him. The guy threatened the man not to change the subject because he was just the cardinal's hunting dog. Treasure ordered to let him in on the details of the task, otherwise he would now grind everything into dust, including him. The man looked at him seriously. He admitted that her task was to open the ancient gate found in the 3rd Eston mining camp and become a vessel for the treasure. The sounds of battle could be heard in the quiet village. Elijah stood before Aaron. It seems that normal damage will not be enough. The guy slowly began to turn into a demon. The girl reflected on the feeling of anxiety she had felt from the window. It was connected with him. Something evil was oozing out of his body. It was getting stronger, as if it was about to burst out of him. The girl tried to pacify him with ordinary means, but it seemed that this was a special case. She took off her cloak. The crowd watched what was happening in silence. Luda realized that things were really bad. He ordered everyone to retreat. Finn did not understand what was going on. The boy asked what was wrong and why things were bad. As they ran, the man explained that he simply hadn't seen Ilya fight seriously. When she starts using her powers, it's best not to be around. Elijah prepared for a serious battle and took up her position. The girl used Ashri's triple slash, a series of quick strikes. Then the titanic cut came into play and was visible beyond the village. Aaron realized that something was wrong. Something has changed. Ilya swung again. The second blow sounded, a snake whip. It was a move that almost got the guy. At that moment, Eren realized that he would not be able to avoid it. The trace of the snake from the blow disappeared, replaced by bright lightning that emanated from the guy. Ilya realized that Eren had parried her blow. Lightning was everywhere, and they hit the roof of the neighboring house. Finn called the girl. Suddenly a pile of debris and stones began to fall on the boy. Elijah turned towards him and noticed this. Eren stood near a large tree. It was dying. The boy addressed the Toa. He still clearly remembers the last moments with her. The boy looked at his hand and thought that the treasure was to blame. No, it wasn't. It was all his fault. Eren turned around at the voice. Someone sneezed and asked what he was. A fair-haired figure leaned against a column. The white crow Frida asked why he refused to be useful to the world and rejected the vessel. She was surprised that he managed to refuse it at all. The guy looked at the girl. Eren approached her and asked if she knew anything about the treasure. The guy was sure of it. Frida replied that she thought she knew, but what her self-confidence cost her. The guy started talking about the prisoners and how she killed them all, even the innocent children. Eren asked the reason furiously. Did this monster really need a sacrifice? The girl confirmed this. However, it made no sense since he was the vessel, not she. Frida asked what he had to sacrifice to become him. Eren got angry at her question. He grabbed her clothes sharply and pulled her towards him. He said that he never wanted it. He asked what he had to do to get rid of it. The girl repeated his question. Get rid of the treasure. Her laughter echoed throughout the silence of the forest. The fact that he says such stupid things only proves how little he knows. Frida continued to laugh. She did not understand why he became a vessel. Sometimes God's will is impossible to understand. Perhaps it was never possible for one as defective as she was, even though she had been a servant of God all her life. Perhaps she was too impudent, wanting more than she deserved. She thought that by sacrificing her soul she could gain a real body. Eren stood his ground. She had to tell him everything if she didn't want to die. How can he get rid of this? The girl replied that she did not know. She only knew that he could not die even if he wanted to, and that he was no longer human. The boy couldn't stay on his feet. Frida continued. He may be conscious for now, but who knows how much longer he can. However, the girl could not send him away like that. She told about a man who knows how to control treasures. He will be able to help Eren. In Harajin, in the northernmost part of the continent, there is a village that is home to all the people with mysterious abilities. There is a wise man there, Josun, who may know something. Eren remembered these words. It doesn't matter whether it's true or false. He has no choice. Something hot hit the guy's head. He screamed in surprise. The guy in the pink kimono next to him realized that he had woken up. He was happy because he had not yet lost his healing skills. The man at his side did not want to upset him, but it seemed that it was not because of his skills, but because it was too hot. Eren washed his face with cold water and still looked at the couple in a daze. The guy only just managed to realize that something was wrong here. He did not understand where he was now. The gentleman looked intently into Irina's eyes. Still holding his chin, he asked the boy's name. He let Eren go. He still didn't understand anything. The gentleman turned away and said that he did not know such a name, but judging by the boy's golden eyes, one could assume that they had the same ancestry. Eren remembered the battle with the white-haired woman. The guy in the kimono asked him if he knew his name. He heard that Eren had climbed over the wall and was causing a ruckus to find him. Eren asked the boy who he was. The gentleman considered this rude, since the elder had asked the question first. He introduced himself. His name is Josun, and he is the leader of Harajin. Eren stood at his chambers. The boy was surprised that this child was Josun. Josun was impressed that Eren was able to find him at the end of the world. He wanted to know why. The gentleman drank the alcoholic drink he had poured earlier in one gulp. Eren didn't understand what exactly the guy wanted to check. The gentleman asked him what kind of monster he was. Suddenly his power took over Aren's body and he was bound. While the boy could not move, the elder tried to figure out what was in front of him, a vessel or a treasure. Josun stood in front of him with one arm outstretched and continued to restrain him. Dee began to notice something. She laughed with Eren and considered this spectacle pathetic because the guy could not resist such an elementary trick. Treasure offered his help, but Eren immediately told him to shut up. Under this pressure, the boy was sure that he could withstand it. After all, it was nothing compared to what he had experienced. Josun looked at him thoughtfully. Suddenly the ceiling in the house collapsed with a crash. A blonde woman landed on the floor. While Josun didn't know what to say, Eren immediately recognized Ilya. The elder asked her what she was doing up there. The girl replied that she had no intention of hiding. She tried to justify herself by saying that the beams were old and not that she was heavy. Ilya asked her brother if he was going to harm Aaron. The girl wanted to explain to him, but Josun sighed heavily. He reminded her that he had asked her to wait outside and not to rush and act rashly. The elder said that he was only checking his condition. According to him, something inside Arena does not wake up even in such situations. According to his words, despite the fact that there is evil inside the guy, he still does not lose control of himself. Aaron thought so. He asked if Josun could determine his condition. He was told that Josun had the ability to suppress the power of the treasure. Aaron confidently said that he had come here to learn this. While the gentleman was trying to pour himself another drink, the sister took the bottle from him and told him to stop drinking. Josun looked at him thoughtfully and said not to rush into it. The master still doesn't trust him, and if the boy hadn't saved Finn, he wouldn't have bothered with these checks. During the battle between Aaron and Elijah, rocks began to fall on the boy. Ilya noticed this while Aaron was standing behind her in a state of transformation. The guy was still in his right mind. He moved with lightning speed to the place where Finn stood. Luda and Ilya ran to the pile of rubble. The girl looked down in surprise. Under them lay a boy and Aaron, who managed to protect him and cover him with himself. Ilya and Josun looked at the guy seriously. Aaron thought about what had happened. It was unintentional. Most likely he had saved it while his mind was in the grip of the treasure. For a moment the boy remembered the silhouette of his sister. Josun admitted that he saw something like this for the first time, even though he had lived quite a long life. He stated that once the connection was established, it would be impossible to find any trace of the original vessel. The elder was certain that due to some exceptional circumstances, he was able to maintain self-awareness. It had been a long time since he had such a curious object for research. Josun asked the boy what had happened. Aaron began to speak hesitantly and thought as he walked what to answer. The guy said he couldn't answer that until he helped him. In his thoughts, Josun considered this attitude and behavior to be rude. The gentleman said to listen to him, because this power is not something that can be shared so easily. He asked the boy why he needed it. Josun asked what his goal was. Aaron took hold of his clothes and replied that his only aim was to get rid of what was inside him and destroy it. A fair-haired figure sat on the cold floor. Several wires were attached to the girl's back. Deep Tooth was spoken to and turned her head towards the source of the voice. A man in a red robe stood before her. She started talking about how he didn't let her die, again. The girl believed that she had disappointed him, her father. The man touched her shoulder and said that she knew why it was necessary. The girl had a doll's body. She sarcastically believes that this body is still useful to her father. The man was glad to see that she could still crack jokes. He asked her to be careful with that body. The cardinal said that he needed her for his purposes. He asked if she understood this. The girl looks at the floor with a sad look and answers that she understands. A man in black entered the hall and addressed the cardinal. He turned to the guest. The cardinal stood silently. Suddenly he broke the silence and declared that he was causing trouble again, for he had always been difficult to handle. The mustachioed man asked who he was talking about. The blond man spoke of Kalos, who refused to fight and hid from their army. The girl looked at him in surprise. The cardinal sent Lenorhound to him, but it did not help. On the contrary, it angered the treasure even more. Deep Tooth remembered the guy she advised to go to Harajin. She assumed that he would run into Kalos. Deep Tooth realized that she still had a chance. The girl turned to her father and asked him to send her. She will go to Harajin to kill Kalos. Aaron walked along the path and dragged some kind of box behind him. He was indignant that he alone had to clean up here, since the building was not destroyed only because of his fault. The guy raised his hand. There was a blue handcuff on it. Earlier, Josun asked him if he wanted to kill the treasure. The elder thought about it. He assumed that the boy had encountered terrible things because of the treasure, but despite this, he still wanted to go down this bloody path. Hatred consumed him. Josun said that he understood his intentions, but still did not trust him. He could not teach the secrets to someone who was not one of them. Aaron wondered if he had come this far in vain. The gentleman said he would give him a chance. Suddenly blue handcuffs appeared on the guy's hands. Aaron asked Josun what it was. He explained that these were handcuffs from his magic, and they could not be removed by physical force. The gentleman stated that 8 residents would receive from him something that would free him from these handcuffs. Aaron has 2 weeks to win the trust of these people and get from each of them what Josun left as collateral. After that, he will be free. The boy was unhappy with his task and the fact that he had handcuffs on his hands again. His past was connected with them. He ordered them to be removed. Josun repeated that he gave him a chance. Now Aaron can live here and communicate with the locals. Because of the handcuffs, he won't be able to use this power. The elder ordered not to go beyond the village. If the boy does not escape and successfully removes the handcuffs, he will be able to learn to control the treasure. 2 days have passed and Aaron still hasn't found the people he needs. He can't even remember their faces. The guy didn't understand how he was supposed to find all 8 of them in such a large city. He couldn't just stop everyone he met to get information. Aaron noticed that although the handcuffs looked normal, he felt calmer in them, and he couldn't hear Dia's voice. A boy approached him from behind and suggested that the boy was not yet accustomed to everything. Aaron turned around. Finn heard that these handcuffs can restrain a spell. The guy meanwhile didn't understand why this kid was following him. After what he said, Aaron understood why he could no longer hear the voice of the treasure. The handcuffs were used to prove Aaron's worth as a citizen. Luda told Finn that this right allowed an outsider to become a citizen of the city, and most adults went through this. The boy remembered that he had not introduced himself. He knew Aaron's name. Finn thanked the guy for saving him. He initially thought he was an enemy since he fought Ilya. Aaron stood up silently. The boy assumed that the guy knew little about the village and offered his help, since it was necessary for the initiation rite. Aaron did not answer and silently collected the remaining fragments. The boy felt awkward and shouted at Aaron to stop ignoring him. The boy finally started talking. He said that he saved him not because he cared, but in order to get closer to Joseon. Aaron asked if he looked like someone who would want to live in such a village. He would leave this place as soon as he got what he needed. The guy told him to stop pretending to be his friend and leave. Finn was enraged by this and kicked Aaron while his back was turned to him. The boy hid behind a column and mocked the guy, and the guy threatened to kill him. Finn turned around abruptly, looking offended. While Aaron was still angry, the boy said to follow him, because they needed to go somewhere. There were red-hot knives and nails on the anvil. There was burning coal in the oven and steam was coming out of it. Aaron and Finn were in the forge. The boy looked at the worker and noticed that they were hitting a hot iron with another iron. Looking at this, he understood the essence of the manufacture of their weapons. As the boys passed by, the blacksmiths noticed them and paid attention. The workers looked intently at Aaron and did not understand what this demon was doing there. Suddenly the boy noticed something huge above him. It was a huge mechanism. Aaron did not understand how people were moving this huge piece of metal. Suddenly, someone's voice interrupted his thoughts and ordered him to leave immediately because this huge plate was descending. With a loud sound, she pressed the slab beneath her. A fair-haired woman, holding a huge piece of iron, explained that it was dangerous to be near the slab while they were working. She admitted that she sometimes screwed up too. Ilya greeted Aaron in their rather nice forge. While the girl was explaining the purpose of his visit, namely that she thought he was bored, so she asked the boy to bring him here, the guy was shocked by her strength with such a physique. Aaron couldn't believe that he was actually fighting this woman. He was suddenly afraid that she would want to beat him up, and he wouldn't be able to use his powers because of the handcuffs. The guy tried to sound confident and hesitantly told her not to order people to go back and forth, and if she wanted to say something, then let her say it here and now. Ilya agreed with him and decided to finish the work first and talk later. She tried to lift a metal pipe. Looking at this, Aaron found another reason to get rid of the handcuffs. The guy was holding an iron figurine of an angry little man in his hands. Ilya said that she made it only yesterday, and maybe it looks a little sloppy. She thought that the figurine was somewhat similar to Aaron. The happy girl asked if he thought the same about her welcome gift. Aaron said that this was not so, and in front of the happy Ilya, he threw out the figurine. The guy didn't understand why she was ready to kill him at their first meeting, but now she was behaving like a completely different person. He asked her if it was her brother's order, and complimented her by saying that she pretended well. The girl smiled and said that his imagination was running wild. With a huge hammer in her hands, Ilya sat down and explained that fighting wasted energy and that they were no longer enemies. It was an opportunity to get along. The girl suggested that maybe the guy would get the opportunity to live here just like her. Aaron looked at her in surprise. Ilya said that there were wonderful people here and that he would like them in time. The guy still didn't understand what she was talking about. Aaron doubted the seriousness of her words. The girl admitted that she invited him here to chat because every time she tries to start a conversation with someone, they run away from her. She then quickly began to tell him about Joseon and her team, namely that Luda is a pervert and Lumi is a reliable guy, even though he looks like a girl. Then, without stopping, she began to talk about relationships and question Aaron. Quickly switching the topic, she began talking about her hobby and weapons. The next topic was captains and initiation rites, and then she talked again about how they would definitely get along. Aaron still couldn't process this rapid flow of information. The guy sat silently and did not understand how it was possible to speak so quickly. While the girl did not stop talking, Aaron complained about why he was having to deal with all this and whether all women were like that. The boy remembered the only girl he knew, his sister. She was completely different. Suddenly someone called Elijah, and she immediately went, hitting Aaron with an iron hammer. While the boy lay sprawled on the ground, Finn looked at him silently. Aaron tried to get up and noticed the blacksmith's stairs. They wished him death in their thoughts and did not want him to stick to Elijah. Aaron was very angry. He hated this village and this woman. Finally, the guy and Finn left this place. Suddenly, the boy noticed something. Several people in black cloaks stood in front of them. The boy turned to Luda, who looked at them disapprovingly. The man asked Finn sharply what that something, meaning Arena, was doing next to him. Luda reminded him to stay away from him because he was dangerous. Finn explained that he couldn't do anything. The elder told him to keep an eye on the boy. The man said that he was assigned to keep an eye on things because he had not yet known fear and had not experienced it himself. Suddenly, Luda pointed his finger at Aaron. The man said that each of them knew that he was a treasure. He believed that they had let in a wolf in sheep's clothing that would swallow their village faster than they could react. While the guy silently looked at them, Luda continued talking about a possible catastrophe because this had already happened. Aaron clenched his hand into a fist. The man noticed it. Luda began to talk about the proof of a permanent resident of the ancients. He asked the guy if the monster could really live among people. The man approached the boy. He did not know what the elder's plan was, but he wanted to express his personal opinion about it. He was sure that Aaron would not win the trust of any person, because in this village there was no one who would like him. Luda turned away and began to walk away. He advised the boy to leave now, before he was stabbed to death in the middle of the night. The guy began to look around, and everywhere he noticed the hostile looks of the local residents. Aaron looked in the other direction, but saw the same picture. They looked at him warily. The boy thought about how these stares always made him feel uneasy, and now he understood why. Finn was shocked that Luda now sounded like a completely different person. He thought about the terrible memories of the treasures of each of the village. The elder knew that this would happen, and therefore set such conditions. Aaron realized that everything was done to make him give in. The guy decided that he would definitely get out of the handcuffs and find a way to control the treasure. Mount Rosetta, 120 kilometers north of Harajin. A camp is spread out on the plain, completely covered in snow. The woman asked how much longer they planned to waste time here. Deep Tooth thinks that they need to leave this mountain before sunset. They need to hurry to meet Kalos as soon as possible. A man in uniform stood in front of her. He put his hand on the table. He turned to her and explained that they were doing their best. He asked if it was easy to travel continuously through the snowy mountains for several days. The man said that the troops were at their limit, so they would set up camp here until the storm passed. He advised the girl to rest. She looked at him sternly and wondered if this was all the Imperial army could do. A huge tree fell in the forest and someone's voice said to be careful. A man in a black uniform cut down a tree. He had a tool with a red blade on the end. He ordered to cut down all the trees here because they needed to collect as much firewood as possible. The workers were smoking and discussing their situation. One of them dreamed of warmth and comfort, and he also noted that they had not yet seen a single animal. The second man said that it was all because of the commissar's woman. The worker agreed that it would be a good idea to go back and rest. Suddenly his partner noticed something coming from the forest. It seemed there was something in the forest. Maybe it was an animal? A huge figure in a grey cloak stood before them. It was the gardener. The two banks were connected by a fast river. The boys were sitting on one of the banks. Aaron asked Finn how much longer he was going to pursue him. The boy explained that he was doing this not because he wanted to, but because it was the elder's request. He was looking after him. Aaron was irritated by this. He told him not to worry because he was not going to do anything like that. Besides, the boy thought that if the elder wanted to keep an eye on him, he shouldn't have sent someone like Finn, because if something happened, the kid definitely wouldn't be able to handle it. The boy turned away in irritation. Finn couldn't stand it and got angry because he called him a child again. The boy believed that he had been recognized as a soldier and was already an adult. In response, Aaron mockingly repeated this because he did not believe his ears. Finn was indignant because Luda said that by killing a man he became a soldier, even though he was 12. The boy declared that this was just the beginning, and once he improved his sword skills, he would kill many enemies. Aaron looked at him seriously. Finn was sure that one day he would become the best soldier, just like Ilya. Aaron began to slowly get up. Suddenly the guy grabbed him by the neck. Finn could not get out, and with a trembling voice said to let him go. Aaron let him go and he fell to the ground. The boy turned away. Finn tried to clear his throat. The boy asked if the guy was trying to kill him. Aaron asked if he was afraid. After all, if he wanted to be a soldier, he had to be ready to accept death at any moment. The guy said that he could be killed by a fellow soldier. If he is ready to kill, then he needs to prepare and be killed. Finn screamed at the top of his voice that he was a monster. The boy did not understand what he had done to deserve this. The boy replied that he had done nothing. Aaron admitted that he simply didn't like the look on his face. He said that many people had died at his hands, but unlike him, he never felt joy about it. Their faces are constantly in front of the guy's eyes. This makes him feel uneasy. As he was leaving, the guy asked who else was a monster, since Finn could still laugh because he took someone's life. Aaron moved away from the boy and walked along the shore. Finn squeezed his trembling hand. He remembered the soldier he had killed recently. Tears came to the boy's eyes. Finn fell to his knees and burst into tears. He did not consider himself guilty because he had no choice. The wounded Deep Tooth clutched her wound. She didn't think any of the traitors would show up here. Black smoke continued to come out of her wound. The girl did not know what kind of ability it was or how to stop it. The commander's opponent was one of the treasures. She wondered if she could make amends for her guilt by getting rid of him. On a tree with a cut branch, a red arrow was visible, indicating the way. The rabbit did not know where to go and bent his fingers, choosing the next option. Suddenly, Kalos decided that he should go there. He was sure of it, because he had a good feeling. Treasure happily jumped in that direction, with the plan not to turn back and go only forward. He decided that he would definitely get out of this mountain. The hour of his wanderings had passed. He returned to the mark he had left earlier on the tree. Suddenly, Kalos remembered that the sun would set in the west, and he needed to descend in its direction, since Trevian was in the south. But the treasure found that the sun was covered by clouds. He regretted that he had not taken a compass when leaving the camp. Suddenly, the rabbit became angry and called himself an idiot because he wanted to rely on a thing made by people. Kalos walked forward confidently. He considered it humiliating to wander around this place. He didn't need help. He would get to the capital on his own and beat Lacris's face. Another hour later, the treasure was back there, near the marked tree. He gave up and finally decided to ask someone. He consoled himself with the thought that there was nothing wrong with asking for directions. The rabbit decided to look for someone here, because there must be someone here. Suddenly the guy noticed someone in that direction. Treasure noticed that the cup was missing. He did not understand what had happened. Someone's body was lying in front of him. The rabbit put his hand on it, and thus healed the person with his powers. Treasure told the man to breathe deeper, and he tried. Kalos stopped the bleeding and gave him some magic. According to him, the fever would subside and soon the soldier would be able to move. Treasure noticed that his wounds were rather strange. He wondered why the soldier in Trevian's uniform was the only one here. Could he be a deserter? In any case, the guy decided to ask him for directions. He told himself not to be embarrassed and to look confident. The treasure stuttered and said that he was lost. He didn't have time to finish speaking when the soldier interrupted him. The man said that they were all dead. The rabbit looked at him worriedly. The soldier held his wound and said that the monster appeared out of nowhere. He and his comrades fired at it, but nothing happened. In the end, they had to flee. He took the treasure by the shoulder. The man shouted that they needed to run quickly because the monster was coming for them. Deep Tooth ran away from a huge forest creature, the gardener. She used her technique and red lightning flashed around. They attacked him. But it didn't help, even though the commander struck him with scarlet thunder at full power. The gardener swung his blade at her and seemed to hit her back. The girl was falling down. It was her third encounter with treasure, but this one was rather strange. She did not feel any spell or malice. The commander tried to catch her breath. It seemed to her that the treasure was like a ghost. She could hardly breathe and didn't know what to do next. The treasure was already standing in front of her. The black smoke continued to spread throughout her body, causing suppuration on her skin. Deep Tooth assumed she had no other choice and decided to rip off her infected arm. The gardener swings his rusty cleaver sharply. The girl was able to dodge his attack. With lightning speed, he delivered another series of blows. They surrounded her and wounded her without her noticing. Suddenly her body fell apart into pieces. The girl's limbs lay on the ground. The gardener looked at her remains. He touched the blade to the head lying on the ground. The real Deep Tooth was standing behind the tree behind him. She was lucky that the bait was activated in time. The girl wondered if he fell for it. The commander held her hand. She decided to wait here because if she let the cup fall to the limit, the treasure would have no chance to find her. The gardener froze. Deep Tooth was still hiding behind the tree and was watching him unnoticed. At that very moment, the treasure dissolved into thin air and disappeared. Before she could turn around, his hand was almost reaching her. Treasure slammed the girl into a tree. He held her by the neck, pressing her to the bark. The commander did not understand how this happened. She thought that the treasures could track people only by their charm. Black smoke filled the air around her. The girl was so close. She just needed to touch, but she couldn't. She felt like she was dying. The commander smiled. Suddenly, someone ordered Deep Tooth to be released. A giant hammer cut down the tree and its power hit the gardener. This blow was so strong that it touched trees several kilometers away. This sound was heard throughout the valley. Among the broken branches and plants lay the body of the treasure. The rabbit turned to Frida and asked if she was okay. Kalos took her in his arms. The girl was still shocked by his arrival. Treasure asked what she was doing there, since she had been badly hurt and had been treated in the capital. He was glad that she was okay. Frida groaned in pain. Black steam was still oozing from her body. Treasure realized that she was in pain and decided to heal her. He put his hand on her, from which a bright light was visible. But he didn't have time. The air was filled with sharp attacks again. The girl shouted at the rabbit to run. Kalos told her not to worry, because as long as he was here, the enemy would not lay a finger on her. Treasure decides to leave her here while he deals with him. He will return as soon as he is finished. Frida was sitting near a tree. The rabbit walked forward. The treasure had been sought by the gardener for a long time. Kalos called him a traitor. In an instant he created a stone hammer behind his back. It glowed with red lightning. His days of being able to roam around so freely are numbered, and the rabbit will seal him with his own hands. The roof of one of the houses was visible against the blue sky. The girl brought a wooden box and said that she had made a second pair. The elder wanted to make sure if anyone had noticed. Elijah said that everything was as usual. The master was grateful to her for the new bracers because her strength was required to make them. They must act carefully so as not to be noticed. Ilya asked her brother whether proof of residence was necessary. In her opinion, it was just a barrier that separated them from the outside world, and instead of uniting them, it made them hostile to the whole world. The elder explained that the initiation ceremony gives the losers a chance to come to their senses and cleanse themselves. He asked, "Hasn't everyone in the village gone through this?" When a person in trouble notices his true self, he realizes that much has changed. The gentleman continued that this way was necessary to show that they shared in this change with him. Elijah emphasized his words about trouble. The girl talks about the war that ended 15 years ago, and after it their village was founded. The elder exhaled transparent smoke. They have been through so much grief, and all share the same pain. In his opinion, wounds do not heal so quickly, and in order to survive, they forgot about the past. Elijah said that this did not apply to her. The girl thought, all because she knows nothing about the war. She still can't remember anything that happened 15 years ago. Elijah wanted to share her memories with at least someone, despite the fact that they were painful. The elder irritably told her not to talk nonsense, since he had asked her many times to consider it a blessing. According to him, there are many truths in the world that should be forgotten. This truth is not worth knowing. Suddenly the ground beneath them shook. Ilya looked out the window. The girl looked excitedly in the direction of the sound. She felt strong streams of magic and how their sources intertwined with each other. The girl turned to her brother. The elder was shaking. He began to guess what was happening. It was nothing other than a battle between treasures. The gentleman remembered that he had already experienced this horror 15 years ago. Since then, it had never left him. A fierce battle raged between Kalos and the gardener. Maple attacked him with his blade. Before he had time to land, the rabbit was ready to swing. A stone hammer was approaching the gardener. Another noise was heard in the forest. Maple stood before him again. The gardener repeated the series of blows again. They were in the air. The rabbit swung at him again. Frida watched from the ground. The earth trembled. The fight of two treasures has a destructive force. Kalos couldn't understand how the enemy was still alive after so many blows. He analyzed the situation and realized that he could use his hand for both attack and defense. Suddenly the battlefield was covered with black steam. Frida knew not to let the smoke get to the rabbit. Kalos was confident that this smoke would not harm him because his body was 99% diamond and could not rot. The rabbit broke his hammer in half. Now the treasure had two weapons. He attacked the gardener with them. Kalos separated them. The gardener was nowhere to be seen. Treasure noticed that the enemy's spell had become more frightening. He realized that this was only the first form, and this was his true power. The black hurricane burst out. He began to approach Frida. The rabbit noticed this. The blackness began to hiss even more. The girl did not approve of Kalos's actions. Treasure covered her with his body. Deep Tooth told him not to do it. The rabbit absorbed this power. Frida rushed towards him. If he gave in now, it would be the end for her. The treasure continued to take damage. Kalos was sure that everything was fine. He would somehow survive. Treasure hugged Frida and asked her if she was worried. He couldn't lose with her looking at him. He hadn't shown his full strength yet. The gardener stood a few meters away from them. Rabbit was sure that he too had not yet given it his all. The enemy thought because he did not understand. He asked why he was protecting her, since she was just a doll in human form. The gardener said that the rabbit's actions did not comply with the first rule of protecting people. Kalos asked if this was a provocation. The rabbit reflects his words, saying that Frida is a human being because she has a heart and a brain. But in his opinion, the enemy does not know this, because he only knows how to kill. The gardener asked if this meant being human. He said that he had noticed how much it affected the treasure. Klen was sure that this form of love for people spoils treasures and makes them look like fools. Kalos got angry and ordered him to shut up and settle this all in battle. He was ready to fight with all his might. Rabbit assumed that they were both tired of fighting with just their hands. Treasure looked at his opponent with confidence and wanted to settle everything once and for all by taking his true form. But the gardener turned and started to leave, saying that there was no time for this. Kalos could not accept this. Klen explained this by saying that they are incompatible, and the fight will not be easy. Their fight result may be ineffective. Treasure left and suggested that the rabbit find someone of his level if he was so eager to fight. Kalos thought he was running away out of fear. Did he think he would just let him go? The gardener said that if he continued to follow him, he would engage in battle. But he didn't want to because one of them has someone to protect and something to lose, and he has nothing. Kalos with weapons in hand and Frida remained standing, watching the treasure leave. The rabbit began to absorb his hammer, and it dissolved in his hand. Treasure replied irritably that today was not the best day for that. He smiled and looked at the girl. This time he would let him go. One of the village houses stood against the evening sky. Aaron walked down an empty street. He thought about the strangeness of this village, and how the streets looked so much alike that he had no idea where he was. The boy scratched his head. It was already dark, and at this rate he would not have time to return home, and the locals were still avoiding him. Perhaps the child was right, and he would not be able to wander here without him. He remembered their quarrel. The image of a boy crying on the bank of a river also appeared in his head. Aaron thought about his stupidity in interfering. He didn't have time to deal with other people's problems. The boy continued walking down the dark alley. He thinks it is necessary to concentrate on his business because he is here to learn how to control the treasure. You can't get attached to anyone. By the way, he didn't know if he could learn anything from the locals. He was interested in another possible way to get rid of the handcuffs. Suddenly the boy noticed a silhouette standing in front of him. A grey-haired man with a straw in his teeth looked at him gloomily. He called Aaron a monster boy and asked if he was lost. The guy remembered him. He was one of that group. The stranger spoke of snow in the north, but today the sky is clear with lots of stars. He called it a wonderful night to die. The man drew his katana from its sheath, its blade shining against the sky. The soldier was from the 1st Division of the 4th Detachment. His name was Heinkel. He called himself the man from whom he would accept death. The man told him not to be offended, because the guy himself was to blame for not listening to them. Aaron bent down to pick something up from the ground. He admitted that he was only interested in who he could fight. The boy held a stick at the ready and made a gesture for him to attack. The battle under the moon was the best opportunity for him to cheer up. The girl lay and again led a monologue. First about her brother, why he behaved like a child, and at such an age he slept with her. Then she spoke about Luda, and about what people turn out to be after years. She hoped for his understanding. Then Elijah asked about Lumi and his relationships and did not understand how she could not know such things about her soldiers. She thought about leaving the army. While the elder covered his ears trying to sleep, the girl told her brother not to fall asleep because she had something to discuss, and he was the best listener. The guy mentally asked her to stop because she never shuts up before bed, but his sister continued. Ilya asked his opinion about Irina. He listened to her, and she hoped that they would get to know each other better. The gentleman really wanted to strangle her, but he asked himself to calm down and wait. After some time the girl fell asleep. The boy looked at his sleeping sister in surprise. He was shocked at how instantly she fell asleep. The elder sat in his chambers and looked out the window. Today he hoped to fall asleep early because he knew that she did not like it when everything happened behind her back. Blades and a stick crossed in a duel. The man swung for another attack. Heinkel attacked Aaron with 2 katanas while he blocked his blows. The guy dodged his sharp blow. The man barely managed to block Aaron's attack. But the guy swung again, and his opponent fell. Aaron looked at him silently. The man thought that every blow chilled the blood. Heinkel analyzed him and realized that although he was not trained in sword fighting, he was quite good in combat. The guy clearly had a lot of experience. The soldier looked at him tensely and wondered if the boy was not forbidden to use the power of the treasure or the charm. Aaron was approaching him, ready to strike again. The guy attacked him, and the opponent blocked his weapon with a blade. Aaron threw another strong punch, but he was able to block it. The man could barely keep up with him. He was overcome by the boy's sheer strength, and at this rate he could lose. Heinkel moved away from him, and Aaron was unable to touch him. The guy didn't understand his actions. The man decided that there was no time to relax and gripped the hilt of his sword more tightly. A soldier used an usher, a double cut. The man then launched a series of punches, calling his technique the swallow punch. The guy didn't expect such speed, and in a second his stick was cut into several pieces. Aaron stepped back, standing with a short stump in his hand. Aaron did not understand why the man suddenly became angry and began to use the same technique as in Ilya. As the man was rapidly approaching and was ready to strike, the boy threw the remains of the weapon at Heinkel. This helped Aaron, and while his opponent was distracted, he had no choice but to kick him. After his attack, Heinkel lay on the ground. The man didn't have time to come to his senses before Aaron was already running towards him. The guy decided to finish before he could think of anything else. But the guy didn't make it. 2 men in black cloaks got ahead of him. They wounded him with blades. Now Aaron was lying in the dust. The 2 ran to their comrade. Heinkel apologized to his partners. The man with the tail explained that they had interfered because of the situation. He told him to rest. The soldiers turned to look at the lying guy. Aaron spoke first. He admitted that he had been waiting for them to engage in battle, since he had already seen them in the morning. He knew that they would attack in a group. In his opinion, 3 against 1 is unfair. The man with the tail declared that a monster like him did not deserve to be treated well. His partner with glasses replied that as long as he could kill him, he did not care. They both prepared to attack. Aaron stood before them unarmed. The opponents prepared to strike, a double blow of the windsword and an asher, a double cut, a swallow strike. It seems the guy had a special plan for this occasion. It was time to escape. Aaron left these 2 behind. The soldiers did not expect such an outcome. The guy hid behind the wall of one of the houses and tried to catch his breath. Aaron thought about the local residents. The boy noticed that everyone could use this ability related to the blade. He decided not to cross paths with them until he found out everything. Aaron remembered the past. Then he didn't care about his life and didn't think about it, but now everything has changed. He won't be mistaken. A guy decided that as long as he was alive, he had a purpose. Suddenly a sharp sensation interrupted his thoughts. Aaron coughed. Liquid spilled onto the floor. The guy looked at his hand and didn't understand what was happening. He hadn't had it for a month and he thought he was cured. So why now? He thought. He probably wasn't getting any better. It was all because of the parasite inside him. Although these braces restrained the power of the treasure, now his body is returning to its original point. Aaron felt eyes on him. Another man in a cloak landed silently on the roof behind him. The guy noticed him and tried to dodge. A cutting blow grazed his shoulder. The killer rushed through him and the guy was left behind. Aaron took hold of the wound with his hand. The girl advised him to protect his vital organs, even though he has perfect reflexes because he is a monster. She confessed that her plan was to cut off his head. She was waiting for this day. Aaron didn't understand what they were talking about. She called him her father's enemy and declared that he would die by her hand today. The guy looked at her in bewilderment. The girl grabbed the handle tightly and prepared to attack. The guy watched her movements. She appeared behind him and delivered a series of blows. The girl didn't even think of stopping. She drove him further and further into a corner. The enemy jumped back. Suddenly she moved somewhere again. The guy looked up. The girl was on the roof. Aaron asked if he was being mocked, since just a month ago he was suffering in an enemy camp prison. The guy asked her what he did, because they don't even know each other, and there's a chance that she mistook him for someone else. The girl replied that whether he is or not does not matter to her, because what is more important is that he is a monster, and that is enough to kill him. In a second she disappeared somewhere again, and started running in circles on the roofs of houses. The guy analyzed her movements and realized that she wanted to find his blind spot and attack him unexpectedly. She used the terrain as an advantage. She will try again to reach his vital organs, although this knife could only cause a few scratches. The girl was behind him, but the guy realized this and managed to turn around. The enemy's blade was not long enough to reach her. She realized what a mistake she had made. At the same time, Eren was ready to counterattack. The guy hit her and she landed on the ground. Eren took the knife from her. Suddenly the girl said that he was finished. At that very moment the guy was left without an ear. A guy with a scar on his forehead landed behind the girl. The enemy turned around. Behind her was a guy in a black cloak. Luda called her Rosalie and asked if everything was okay. 3 soldiers with Heinkel just returned. The captain asked where they had been. The man touched the girl and said that she was hurt. He asked them how they dared to leave her alone. Rosalie blushed. Luda suggested that she might become his wife someday. He jokingly said that he didn't care about the soldiers, even if they were wounded 100 times, but he wouldn't let a single hair fall from the girl's head. The captain was not surprised that they could do nothing without him. At this time, Eren began to speak. Luda looked at the guy with contempt and decisively declared that it was time to finish off the monster. Rosalie suddenly interrupted him and said that she would do it because she almost succeeded. The man refused her, saying that he would kill him himself. Eren stood before him, preparing for the upcoming battle. Luda called the guy a monster and asked about his readiness. The boy pondered his situation. If his opponent was a captain, it was logical to assume that he was quite strong. But Eren did not sense any anger from him. Moreover, he did not take a fighting stance. Eren remembered that when he cut off his ear, he also did not feel rage. He concluded that such people are much more dangerous. In a second, Luda disappeared from his field of vision, although only a second ago he was standing in front of him. Eren felt his presence behind him. The commander had already swung his katana. The guy managed to dodge. He swung again at the same time as Eren jumped back. The squad leader was behind him again and stopped the blade above him. Luda decisively inflicted another wound on him, cutting through his shoulder. Eren still didn't understand how because he didn't see him. Behind him, the commander asked him where he was looking, since he was already here. The blade was near the guy's neck. Eren couldn't keep up with it. Luda attacked him again. Eren knew that he had discovered all his blind spots. His speed was so great that he couldn't keep up. The man explained that he uses the magic in his legs to maneuver. No one can match his speed, not even the other captains, much less Eren. Eren half turned to face his opponent. He asked why he decided to tell all this in the heat of battle, and whether he wanted to give in. The guy thinks that if he was going to kill him, he should do it right now. Luda told him to keep quiet. In an instant, the guy's leg was cut by 2 attacks. Eren fell to his knees. The commander declared that only he could decide whether to kill him or continue playing. He was not interested in the enemy's opinion. According to Luda, all he needs from the guy is for him to dance in time with his sword. The man mockingly reminded him that he couldn't move because of his wounds. He asked about his trump cards, because dying without showing anything was not interesting. Eren didn't want to admit it, but there was a huge gap between their skills. Without the power of the treasure, he couldn't be defeated. Because if the guy had this power and he could use the charm, he could. Since Arena has nothing to show, Luda is going to finish this fight. The guy understood that he couldn't die so easily. The braces on his arm began to split. The commander noticed this. Eren stood in front of the enemy. His wound began to regenerate and his ear was almost back to normal. The guy's eyes lit up with a golden light. With a calm look, Luda noticed that he had finally opened up. He didn't think it was very funny to just poke a doll. He started laughing. Endless plains north of Karajin. Eren stood among hundreds of tombstones and noticed someone's silhouette in front of him. The guy was in the cemetery. The events took place about an hour ago. Suddenly someone ordered to stop. Eren and Luda looked at the distance between them. The elder separated them. He stood between them and held the blade of a sword in his hand. He looked at them sternly and forbade any fighting. The commander hid the weapon and said that the fun was just beginning. The elder asked Luda a question regarding his assignment. He recalled the details that he was only allowed to draw his blade if Eren opened his golden eyes. The boy did not understand what he was talking about. According to him, if Luda had put his emotions above all else, he would have put the entire village at risk. The commander began to make excuses, saying that he just wanted to play around and not hurt him, since he was not an amateur. Luda called the gentleman not young, distrustful, and grumpy. The elder did not like such expressions. The commander turned to him and said that he should have foreseen this. According to him, it is impossible to forbid a tiger to eat a piece of meat lying in front of him. This is the reason for sharpening the fangs. The elder believed that in order to become a man, a criminal must endure. Luda gave the reason why he volunteered for this mission. He just wanted to let his charges vent their rage, but since there was nothing else to do, they were leaving. The commander and the others did not have time to leave because Aaron got ahead of them. The man began to provoke the guy, calling him a loser and saying that he was so bad that there was no point in taking out his anger on him. If they continued, the only fun would be his eyes. He thinks that without the power of the treasure, Aaron is nothing. The commander asked Aaron if he thought that he was trying his strength on him because Aaron had not seen even a part of his potential. As he was leaving, Luda told the boy not to get cocky after seeing real power. The squad laughed and called the boy a monster. Arena was already twitching with anger, while the elder silently watched them. The boy glared at the old man. He waited for an explanation of what was happening. Aaron asked what he meant about allowing the blade to be drawn in front of him. The gentleman looked thoughtfully at his charge. First he told him to change his clothes, and they would go to one place. Someone was shoveling away the white snow near the tombstone. Aaron impatiently asked the elder why he was digging the snow if he had brought him here. The old man ordered him to calm down, because his family and friends could be lying here. He explained about the event 15 years ago. Everyone was related to each other, to him, to the boy, and the rest of the inhabitants of Harajin, because they had black hair and golden eyes. Sometimes the elder comes here to maintain order. This is the place they could call home, the place where Harajin was. He told the boy that this village was rebuilt to replace the old one that had fallen to the ground. According to him, there are different races living in the village now, but previously they were the only inhabitants. After the war, they gave shelter to the southerners who lost their home. Thus, due to the development thanks to the new people, Harajin received a second life. The boy did not understand what the old man wanted to say by this. He asked him if what he had done to him earlier was connected to the past. Aaron asked about the point of bothering if he was going to kill him anyway. The elder looked at Aaron seriously. He only told him that he knew absolutely nothing. The old man said that even if they turned the whole world upside down, they still wouldn't be able to kill him with their own strength. The guy looked at the gentleman in shock. Aaron did not understand how this was possible. The fact was that an ordinary mortal could never kill a treasure. A treasure could only be killed by another treasure. According to his words, even if the vessel is killed, the treasure will still live, because it itself is immortal. The elder considered the treasures to be God's creations beyond their understanding. The boy asked him what he meant. Arena was worried about the question of getting rid of the treasure. He turned to the old man and told him not to joke like that anymore, because he knew what to do and he had the strength. The guy showed his bracers and asked if he used them to control his power. The gentleman said that this was the only possibility, since he was able to control the treasure, and the old man also noted that he had never said that he had such power. Aaron called him a liar and wondered what he had been doing all this time. The elder told him to think about it, because no matter what he did, one day the bracers would be unable to hold the power. This was because his body would no longer be able to resist the power of the treasure. He stated that it was only a matter of time until the treasure figured out how to bypass the bracer's control and take over the vessel completely, and if the boy succumbed to its power, he would be consumed much sooner. Even now, Aaron was taking the power of the treasure because his ear and wounds had completely recovered. The old man asked him if he understood why Luda had not cut his throat then. The boy remembered Deep Tooth's words that he would not be able to die, even if he really wanted to. Then she said, smiling, that now he could no longer be considered a human being. Aaron realized that these bracers were only buying him time. Despair began to fill his mind. Was this life's path of fighting in vain, when this thing would swallow him up sooner or later anyway? What was the point of it all then? The guy thought about the treasure inside him, which was probably laughing at him now. The elder approached Aaron. He said that he could not get rid of the treasure, but his actions could delay the absorption. Another option is to seal it again, while Aaron is the one with the treasure's power. The guy was interested in this outcome. The old man's eyes glowed gold. He decided to first draw power from Aaron's equally golden eyes. Aaron remembered the golden eyes. Because the charm always takes its form regardless of the talent of the practitioner. Its form is always limited. The key power of the golden eyes is the ability to manifest the charm in any form. The old man explained that the more he trains, the more his strength increases. For example, using the charm, you can create a wall that protects you from treasure. Aaron remembered how he had managed to resist Dia with his eyes back then during the fusion. It hadn't been pure luck. The old man said that in other words, he could live his life without losing control. However, using them is not so easy, and training is very difficult. Success cannot be achieved in one day, so he tried to move them with Luda. He asked Eren to remember how it was, to open his golden eyes and get used to the sensations. Sealing the treasure is right behind this. The guy asked not to rush. The elder looked at the boy questioningly. Eren asked what all this was for, if he was just going to awaken his eyes to open. The boy asked why he was so impatient, and most importantly, why he wanted to seal the treasure if he had no reason to help him. The elder explained that they had no more time to wait. He wanted to help, and Eren was not the only one who held a grudge against the treasure. He said that despite the name of this place, Endless Plains, it was once the largest forest in the north, but due to an incident 15 years ago, one treasure turned everything into ashes. The treasure was called Valatro, the Flaming Clown. He is the strongest of all the treasures. Red flags were visible among the snowy wasteland. Someone touched the red cloak and asked if everything was okay. Frida replied that everything was fine. She told the rabbit that her body was 80% prosthetic, and when she replaced those parts, her problems with maneuvering would disappear. The commander wanted to hurry up with the road. They decided to go further. They missed each other a little. Kalos was going to go north, although they needed to go south. The girl turned to the treasure. Frida asked him where he was going and whether he was really going to return to the capital. The rabbit thought about going to the capital because everything was fine with Frida. Treasure explained that he wanted to inform Lakrisai of the current situation. The girl said that if it concerns her, then it is not necessary. She explained that she had acted of her own free will and that the cardinal should not be blamed for this. Kalos looked at her in surprise. He began to speak, but the commander interrupted him and thanked him for his attention. Even though these feelings belong to the vessel, she believes that the two of them should be separated. Kalos is shocked by what he hears. The girl hoped that he would remember this and act accordingly. Treasure came closer and assumed that she was here because she didn't want to see him. Frida looked at him blankly. She said it wasn't because of him. The commander reminded about the failed mission and her destroyed squad. To clear herself after the defeat, her goal was to capture Harajin. The girl stated that another treasure had awakened under the second Eston mining camp. It has shown itself to be a future devil, so it is close to becoming an enemy of humanity. He was last seen heading towards Karajin, which is why she joined the expedition. Kalos thought about what he had heard. He could not stand aside, because another enemy had awakened. He decided that the treasures must be stopped immediately. The rabbit declared that he would go with Frida to Harajin. The commander smiled grimly. In one of the houses, training in swordsmanship was conducted. This was the training ground of Harajin. The man barely managed to block his opponent's attack. Luda said that it was too slow and asked if he had had breakfast. The commander addressed everyone, calling them too slow. Now is not the time for this, because the war is not over yet. Luda was curious about what Finn was doing now. He had given his charges 10,000 exercises to do. Some of the guys were indignant about the number, and one of them said that Finn had been with a lady the night before. The commander threatened that if anyone stumbled, they would start over. Rosalie practiced swinging her sword. Suddenly the girl's attention was drawn to the person who entered the area. She stopped training and froze. The man with the high ponytail turned to her. The others on the site noticed a familiar face. At the entrance in the sunlight stood a boy. The others in the house stopped and looked at him. Eren watched seriously. One of those present turned to Luda. The man irritably walked towards the newcomer. Heinkel called Eren a bastard and asked how he dared to show up here. He showed his displeasure by telling him to leave and stay away from them. The guy replied that he didn't come here to create problems. He explained that he had come to this place because he wanted to learn how to wield a sword. A moment earlier, the elder asked the boy if he should take off his braces. Eren confirmed. He knew he needed to learn how to use his eyes and then seal the treasure. He asked if there was still a need to wear them. The old man looked at him silently. He said that he could teach him how to seal the treasure. But the condition for this is a rite of passage that must be passed. Arena was not satisfied with this. Josen said that it was obvious, since he was still dangerous and couldn't walk around freely. He pointed at Eren and reminded him that he still didn't trust him. He hadn't even decided whether he was a man or a treasure. The boy asked impatiently and irritably whether this initiation rite would clarify anything. He was sure that he was a man because he walked and spoke solely of his own free will. Josen asked him distantly if this was the definition of his humanity. He recalled the carpenters, blacksmiths, soldiers and farmers that Eren had seen that morning. Although their roles were different, they all could not exist without relationships. For in the relationships between people bonds are born, and thus they create a village. The elder explained that man is a being who exchanges meaning with all mankind through bonds. This is a necessary quality to be considered a man. He asked the guy what about him. In his opinion, Aaron was lonely like a wild animal, and if he cannot learn to be a man, he will lose to everyone, let alone the treasure. Joseon gave him a choice. Either he studies himself or waits for the treasure to awaken. But if the old man sees even one sign of awakening, the boy will be expelled from the village. Aaron was tense. In the training room, one of those present did not believe what he heard. Luda stood in front of the guy. The man looked down on Aaron and repeated his question regarding swordsmanship. Looking into the eyes of the tense guy, he repeated it again. Aaron tried to remember the elder's words and realized that he had never thought about it. All he knew in life was how to fight, so he decided to start with what he already knew. Ilya stood on the street and thought about the fact that she had overslept. The girl thought about the boy's teasing and Luda, who had tired her out with his harassment. Near the entrance, she noticed Finn and turned to the boy. She asked him what he was doing here. Ilya jokingly suggested that he had overslept too. She teased him about skipping classes, since he had just become a student. The girl touched his shoulder and suggested that they go together, and if he said that he had been with her the whole time, nothing would happen to him for it. But Finn did not listen to her and ran away. Ilya was left standing in bewilderment. There was a crash and the girl turned around. Luda dodged the blow. Aaron tried to hit him with a wooden training sword. The guy couldn't do it because the commander was very fast. The man reminded him of a chance to get even with him. He mockingly asked if he was too fast or if Aaron was too slow. Luda put on a blindfold on purpose, considering this fight fair. He was interested in what his opponent would do. The commander declared that if the boy could touch him, he would be taught swordsmanship, but if he gave in, he would leave the village. Some of the observers began to laugh among themselves. One of them believes that Luda does not allow him to get hurt, and at the same time tries to undermine his morale. The second man suggested that the insults directed at the guy were meant to piss him off. The second added that it was also for fun. Aaron fell to the floor. He was like a drowning bug trying to swim out. The boy hit himself hard. The man stood in front of him. Arena still couldn't reach him, and his tactic of doing it through a somersault didn't work. The guy began to rise to his feet. Luda was very close to him, but at the same time incredibly far away. Aaron was sure that he had not become weaker. Since last time, he realized that the gap between their skills was too great. The guy swung again. The commander praised him for his energy and fighting spirit. He admitted that he was beginning to get tired of dodging. He suggested that Arena finish because the boss could come at any moment. The guy touched the man's shoulder with his hand. Aaron noticed that something was wrong. During the attack, he dropped his weapon. His wooden katana hung in the air. Suddenly someone caught her. Those present were surprised. Luda removed the blindfold to look at the guest. Elijah held a sword in her hand. Luda didn't even have time to notice how he was attacked and flew to the far end of the room. The others were shocked by her strong blow. The girl looked sternly towards the fallen one. Elijah turned to Luda. She asked him about his right to throw words around, since he himself was not able to avoid a blow. The girl said with annoyance that they were having fun here without her. She asked the man again about his relaxation, although in her opinion the blow was not that strong. She looked at the others with a cold gaze. She addressed everyone in the room and decided to start with this fight. She asked them if anyone wanted to explain themselves and told them to step forward. She then turned to the captains and noted that they had been ignoring her since yesterday and that this made her feel superfluous. Luda tried to get up. He regretted that she had found out everything. The man tried to connect his thoughts and say something. The commander did not have time to justify himself when Aaron interrupted him and said that he was to blame for what happened. The guy continued. He said that there was no need to scold anyone because everything happened because of him, so the outcome was obvious. Aaron admitted defeat and himself spoke about leaving the village. Luda silently watched him. The guy silently turned around and walked towards the exit. Ilya did not understand what he was talking about and asked the guy to stop. Meanwhile, Lumi turned to the girl and said that he would explain everything. Aaron hit his forehead on the rocks. The guy called himself a weakling because he couldn't sleep at night because he was thinking about going here, and in the end it all turned out like this. He touched the stone wall. He didn't know what to do next. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a painfully familiar voice. He thinks that Aaron is helpless without her. Tiny D was behind him, sitting on his left shoulder. Aaron turned around furiously and did not understand how she could speak again. Even so, Aaron can see the treasure. D greeted him and asked if the vessel was bored with her. White snow was breaking through the unfinished house. Aaron stood over the table and looked at his things. The guy stared gloomily at the bag. Dee admitted that she felt sad because she had no one to talk to all the time. Aaron looked at her with irritation. Treasure asked if he thought by any chance that Josun's bracers could hold her for eternity. It was a piece of cake, because in the opinion of the treasure, it was much more serious to be under an ancient spell. Suddenly the boy discovered that one of the braces on his arm had cracked. Treasure explained that because of yesterday's fight, the power of the bracers began to weaken because the boy opened his golden eyes. Dee appeared as a tiny spirit. She said that in time she would acquire her true form. Aaron realized that the treasure was already aware of his ability. Even though Dai was involuntarily inside him, she still knows about everything that happened to the guy, and even knows about his intentions with Josun. By the way, the treasure asked if Josun was his relative. Dia said she never thought it was true. Does Aaron really think the truth can seal her? Suddenly Aaron grabbed the annoying creature. It fit easily in the guy's hand. He admitted that his first thought was to tear the treasure to pieces, but he could not avenge the Toa by simply sealing her. After he learned that the treasure could not be sealed, he made his choice. The guy angrily declared that he would definitely find a way to lock the treasure underground. Dee was still captured and admitted her helplessness. She wished Aaron luck. Finally, the treasure turned to the guy and asked about the bracers. Were they really made by Josun? Aaron asked what she meant. Dee broke free from his grip. She didn't want to underestimate the power of humans, and golden eyes were a human ability. The treasure asked the boy if a man could separate the treasure from the vessel. She was leading to the fact that the bracers were made by someone else. With a gleam in her eyes, Dia declared that this power did not belong to man. Aaron spat and declared that he did not believe this nonsense. Dee continued. If Aaron was suddenly curious about how she knew the treasure, it was because she knew about the colors of the charm. Treasure said that she was not lying because lying is a human prerogative. Dee happily declared that she was the only one on the guy's side. An iron figurine similar to Aaron fell to the floor. The boy bent down to pick her up from the ground. He thought about it. Aaron didn't believe Dia, but there was something really wrong with the elder. The boy just needed to find a way, even if it was with his help. And what worried Aaron more was the treasure inside his head. He didn't know if he could stand it. The boy continued to think until he heard something. He turned around. A man stood on the threshold of the house, leaning against the doorframe. Luda finally found him. Aaron looked at him darkly. The boy left the house. The man asked about his departure. The commander warned him about possible trouble, because in the north they say that it is dangerous to show up on the street after sunset, and it is better to leave during the day. Aaron sighed and stopped. He sarcastically called this decision noble. He kept his promise, and therefore told the commander to fuck off. Luda told Aaron to wait. The guy didn't understand what else he wanted from him. The roofs of houses and everything nearby were covered with a blanket of snow. During the meal, Luda asked Aaron about the northern mountains, since he guessed that he was there for the first time. The commander admitted that he was surprised to learn about the boy's homeland, despite his southern accent. Then the man asked him about his turbulent past. The man was shocked by his 10-year stay in the mining camp and admired his endurance for living there for so long. Aaron looked at him calmly, but there was something new in his gaze, and Luda noticed it. The guy admitted that this attitude towards him was strange after everything that had happened. He asked why this was happening if they were not friends. The commander lit a cigarette. He told Aaron to relax because there had only been a few fights. Luda admitted that everything had changed since yesterday. Aaron felt like he was threatening him like a monster. The man exhaled translucent smoke. Although Aaron sounded like a human, his impression of him was not the best. The commander began to think that the guy had changed after all, because he appeared out of nowhere and asked to teach him martial arts. The man was surprised by this decision. Luda said that if Aaron were a monster, he wouldn't have asked such a question. He laughed at him because he made a complete fool of himself. Aaron started to get angry. In any case, he asked the guy not to attach any importance to it, because he still wanted to see him as a human being. Suddenly something caught Aaron's attention. There was a pair of dark red shoes on the floor. The boy began to get up. He thanked Luda for seeing him off like a human being, but now it was time for him to go. Aaron spoke about the commander's comrade who should return soon. The man realized what was going on. He told the boy not to worry about it. Luda showed him the shoes and said that they belonged to his daughter. Aaron was surprised by what he heard. The commander grinned at the surprised guy and admitted that it was hard for him to imagine that someone with a mug like his could have a child. And yet, he lives twice as long as Aaron. Luda thinks the shoes are cute. They are made of leather by the most famous craftsman in Castile, his hometown. He won them from a drunken factory owner, and many praised him for giving his daughter her first gift on her 12th birthday. The man was sure that if she were alive, she would probably ask why he was keeping this old junk. Eren looked at the commander in surprise. The guy lowered his gaze. The man began to drink alcohol from the bottle, washing down his grief. Luda said that Arena should consider it an honor that he was the first one to cross the threshold of this house, with the exception of his daughter. The boy's gaze became even darker than usual. He knew what it meant to lose a family. He didn't try to say that he understood his feelings, but he knew what it was like to have the whole world turned upside down. He admitted that even now he hated himself for feeling that way. Luda put the bottle on the table. Eren thought it was unfair to blame him for all the problems, but the man guessed what he was getting at. The guy thinks that he too is just a victim of circumstances. The commander admitted that because of the anger inside him, everything else ceases to make sense. He also doesn't care about the names of those he killed, where they came from, and other things like that. He was delusional in thinking that he could come to his senses after spilling someone's blood. After each time, his daughter's face appeared before him. He told Eren not to say anything because he was a monster. Luda looked sternly at the guy and said that if he could kill him, he would have already broken his neck. He picked up the bottle again and started drinking. The commander told him to thank the boss, because she was the only reason the boy was able to cross the threshold of this village. The guy asked about Elijah. Luda called her a busty chatterbox with incredible strength. Eren didn't mean that. The guy didn't understand why she supported him. The man explained that she had no reason to hate him. He told her about her memory loss after what happened, and that she was now experiencing a new life. The man called the girl the most carefree of them all. The brother-in-law of the house opened slightly. Luda and Eren looked in the direction of the sound. An excited Elijah stood on the threshold. The guy in the black cloak was on duty and wondered why it always snowed during his turn. He wanted to hurry up and drink quickly, because he was frozen wandering through the streets of the village. Suddenly he saw someone's footprints in the snow. It's been about half an hour since the last patrol, but these tracks are still very fresh. A man was playing with a coin and said to remind his interlocutor of God's words about the unpredictability of the world. Leonardhound spoke of the vessel and treasure that Deeptooth had lost to, and that he would now head to Harajin. The man was curious about what changes his actions would lead to. First, he wanted to talk about Hosun and Ilya, because with her soldiers in the vanguard and his help in the rear, they would be able to handle any situation. His plan was to deal with these two first. Leonardhound threatened the man in the cloak, because if he failed, he would repeat the fate of his predecessor, whose head was removed from his shoulders thanks to Elijah. The man took the paper in his hands. Leonardhound had come to him especially because he understood the difficulty of the situation. He ordered the man to take care of internal affairs. To avoid surprise attacks in the event of the Battle of Harajin, the soldiers will go behind the village walls. There may be doubts about an ambush, but if information comes from within, it will be accepted as truth. Leonardhound's plan was to use the underground passage in the center of the village to overthrow Josun. He explained that if he was eliminated, Elijah would not be able to resist. A man burnt a piece of paper. The first task will be to figure out what false information to give them. He found this situation exciting because this village would fall in the same way they had used against them. The man in the cloak asked what he should do with the treasure. The Hatter said to leave him, because if he was hostile to the people of Harajin, it would play into their hands. If the treasure decides to fight for the village, Kalos will deal with it. Besides, the rabbit is one of the strongest treasures alive. The village guard had been peeping from the leaky roof all this time. He had no idea who it was. The guy assumed it was another person from the Empire. Leonardhound spoke of payment for the mission, but only if Harajin fell. He did not trust his accomplice very much. The man spoke about trust and concern about him. Suddenly the Hatter sensed something was wrong. He looked towards the roof where the guard sat. He instantly disappeared from sight. The man thought he was imagining things, but the man in the cloak interrupted him and immediately disappeared from sight. The guy ran along the boards to convey information to the commander and the others as quickly as possible. Suddenly an enemy appeared in front of the guard, drawing his weapon in mid-flight. Ilya poured alcohol on Luda, who was lying nearby. Eren watched what was happening with concern. The girl asked the guy not to worry about him because he deserved it.